Adil, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Phil, I can hear you. Just give me a second, please.
Yeah, fine. That looks good. Like. Yeah. I quite like it like that because you just get a bit of light outside and some shapes. Right, really, because you can take over that. Right, this Adil's online. I've unmuted the mic.
Have we got the slides on? They're sharing now. I don't be wrong. Hello? Hello?
Hi, we can
Hello.
hear you.
Who is that?
This is Iram, one of the participants.
Oh, hello, Iram. I'm trying to get someone from Illuminations to actually speak to me. Hadil said to Phil that she would be back with a minute, and we can't tell if we're on. We can't unmute our video, do anything now until she hands over the hosting to us or something. This is the first time we've worked with the Abu Dhabi branch. We usually work with the Dubai branch in Illuminations, so this is our first time. So I'm sorry if people are all promptly, nicely there on time, that you're having to wait. But as I said, we're also working.
No problem, yeah. I thought you were wondering whether we could hear you or not, so I messaged. No problem.
No, that's great. I see that I'm unmuted. You're unmuted. The others are all muted. But at the moment, usually we just get given the hosting so we can show slides and see people and do all that. But at the moment, that's not happening. Hello, okay. I'm speaking to Hadil. Hadil, can you hear me, please, from Illuminations?
Hey, Leila, yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, can you put the video on, please? You've muted the video and I have no control over what's happening on the screen at the moment.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna admit it right now.
So in case any of the rest of you, I'm hoping you can hear me, those who are online. Right, okay, I'm just going to start my video now. So hopefully you'll be able to see me shortly. Okay. So now I have this. Can I just ask you whether you have, at the moment, do you have slides on the screen? Those of you who are online at the moment, can you see the slide that's there?
Yes, we can see the slide with the title slide, transformation.
You can see a title slide. That's fantastic. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Because it's a bit hard to know at the moment what you can and can't see. Okay. So at the moment, I'm just, I'll tell you who I have coming up on my screen. And if you can just unmute yourself to say hi. What we usually do in these situations is that we have a little bit of intro, and as people are joining us, and then we will ask you to mic your, just to mute your mics when you're not speaking, if we're speaking, in case there's feedback. But then if you want to ask a question or you have a comment or an observation, please feel free to unmute your mics. Also, we like it if we can see you, so we know we're not speaking to rooms of empty people, or you haven't all fallen asleep. So if you want to put your videos on, you can. If that affects you in terms of your, you know, your bandwidth and it stops you from hearing or participating, then okay, turn them off. But mostly we ask people, put your videos on so we can see you, particularly with the topic we're talking about today, which is NLP, because body language and facial expressions and engaging with people is an important part of NLP. And we will be doing an exercise a bit later on, which will involve us actually seeing you and you seeing each other. Especially if there's several of you, we might put you into a breakout room so you can do a little bit of work together. So if I can ask you all to unmute your videos, who have your videos muted at the moment, just unmute your videos. And also, I'll just ask you, as I said, as we go through, just to unmute your sound so I can hear you. And I know that you're there and you're hearing me okay. So I have the next one under, I'm just going down the list now that it's coming up on my screen. So I have Karen Reynolds. Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Great. And I think I can see you. I'm just moving boxes around here. Whoops. Right. Okay. Yep, I can see you with a nice picture behind your head. Is that right? You've got the right one. Good. Okay. Then I have Mariam. Is that right? Can you hear me? Your name has popped off the screen again.
Hi, it is Mariam.
It's
Yes,
Mariam.
I can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. Can you put your video on so I can see you?
1 minute.
Okay, so yeah, there you are. Hi. So nice to see you, Mariam. And next I have, let's see, who have I got? I've got Aram, who spoke to me before. Can you put your sound and video on, Aram?
Hi, yeah, here I am.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're all ladies so far. That's interesting, isn't it? Often in NLP we have men and as well as women. Usually for our therapy and assertiveness courses, it's mostly women. But NLP, so far, we have women so far. So I have Anna Krolikowski. Is it Krolikowski? Your name's run out on my bar. Anna?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Do you have a video as well?
Yeah, with the video, just a moment. Yeah, I need to do something. So
Excellent.
video will be soon.
Okay, fine. I'm sorry if any of you haven't got your hair ready or weren't properly dressed, but as I said, for NLP, we like to see people as much as we can. Hessa, I have Hessa Alblushi next on the list. Can you hear me, Hessa? It looks like Hessa is just connecting to her audio, so let's come back on Hessa in a minute. I have Vaishali, is that correct? Vaishali Gupta?
Hi, yes, I'll just put on my video. Just give me a minute.
Okay.
Hello,
Okay,
can you
great.
see me?
Not at the moment. I had you on my list and then you went. Now I think you're back, and now I have Hessa now. Okay.
Can you see me?
Not yet. Can you
Hold
see
on.
me? Okay.
Yeah, I can. Can you see
Okay.
me?
Not so far, but I'm having to scroll up and down because it's only showing me a couple of people's faces at once. Ah, there you are. Yes, I
Yeah?
can see you. Yeah, yeah. Okay, great, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, then, lovely. So we have you. We have Miriam, but not got her camera on yet, and Anna is also working on the camera. And Sonia. We have Sonia Kundi. Sonia.
Hi.
Hi. Have you got a video, Sonia?
Yes, I do.
If you can just put your video on. As I said, if any of you have a problem that the video's too much on your bandwidth, but we like to have the video on for the, especially for the courses like NLP, where we can actually see people and see that they're hearing us.
I'm gonna give it a go. I'll just see, because yesterday I was a bit, it was a bit slow.
Yeah,
But
okay, fine. And then we have Elisa, is it Sarah? Elisa, if you can unmute yourself and put your video on so I can see you and hear you.
Hello, you need to see and hear me.
Well, preferably, yeah.
Okay.
That would be good. The more of you are online that we can see, the better, because as I said, with particularly talking about communication, it's really good to be able to see the face And we're also used now to wearing masks, and we can still actually do things with eye movements, which is one of the things we're going to talk to you about in our session today, a practical takeaway about the way that the eyes move and work when they're communicating. So it's good if we can see you.
Leila, can I just interrupt you for a minute? I'm not able
Please.
to hear you very well.
You can't hear me very well?
I mean, you are sounding, but it's not very loud.
Right, I've got my volume turned up maximum. The problem is I'm not controlling this. This is going through Illuminations, so I don't know how much control I have from the middle end. If it's not, I'll lean forward, but if it's not, if I'm not understandable, if you're not hearing me, please let me know, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And some people may be hearing me better than others. So Carolina, I have a Carolina. Carolina is connecting to audio right now, according to the system I'm looking at here. Those of you who have just joined us since we started, please be patient, because this is the first time we've done this with the Abu Dhabi Illuminations. We've been working with the Dubai so far. I have a Rahbani Nahid that's just joined us. Rahbani, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. Please correct me if I'm not. Can you hear me, Rahbani?
Yes, please.
Okay, and have I got your name correctly?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let me know if you can put your video on, that would be really good. If you can't, then so be it, but it would be good as many as possible can have their videos on, then we can see you and we know we're talking to someone. And I have Sonia now on the video. Hi there, Sonia. And I have, great, I've got a few people now just coming up on their videos. So we've got Karen, we've got Sonia, we've got Elisa. Elisa, I can't see a face. I can see a beautiful sort of like a light with shining rays coming off it. I don't know if Elisa is a very spiritual person, and so you don't have a physical form. Or if, yeah, there you are. No, that's Sonia. You're not as, Elisa's popped down the bottom there. Elisa, do you have your face available?
Yeah, I'm not sure what is happening. I see that not all the people are showing their faces. So I don't understand what is this that some people show and some people not showing. And
No,
I don't know if there
understand.
is some problem with my...
I wish I had control, because then I would put everybody on. Elisa, I just saw your face, I think, a minute ago. We ask people to stay with their videos on. That's how we usually work. And to just keep themselves muted unless they're talking to us if it causes feedback or a problem, which I know sometimes it does. I have Kamani, Kamani, can you hear me? I have a Kamani, but your audio is shown as switched off and I have no video. Kamani, can you just unmute yourself to let me know that you can hear me? Okay, so I'm just going to now speak to everybody who can hear me. If anybody can't or anybody joins us late, we're going to make a start now anyway, because some of you have been very patient and have been on since we started. So if I just briefly, I'm going to introduce myself and say something about the video, about the presentation. I have the video on the mind now, but actually we're going to do a PowerPoint for you. And we're going to do some discussion. You're free to ask questions if there's anything we say that you don't understand. But if you can just give us a little bit of time at the beginning to set this up and explain what we're going to be doing. If you do have the ability to put your video on, please do, because it actually makes it a lot easier for us to communicate with you, to know who's talking to us. And especially when we actually do a practical exercise, it will be much better if we can see what you're doing and you can see each other. And we'll put you into breakout rooms if we have several of you on video, so that you can actually work together to do a couple of things that we're going to get you to do as an exercise. Okay, so I'm going to assume now, if you're having a problem with your video, just do a thumbs up if I ask a question. Please interact, because this is not just, the whole point of this is it's a live webinar. It's not a podcast. It's not something we pre-record and you just watch. It is being recorded, so people can have a look if they need to. It doesn't get put out anywhere, obviously. It's kept private to you, but it's for us to have a record of what was done. And NLP is probably one of the hardest things to do on online, because it is about communication and it is about body language, facial expressions, voice tonality, and all of that, none of which are the same as you know online, particularly the visuals, which can be a bit clunky when it comes to the online platforms. Even though I can see most of you pretty well right now, I can see at the moment Iram and Karen and Vaishali. I can't see Elisa. So this is something that Transformations Institute, that's Phil and myself. Phil is going to do most of this this session, and he'll be in shortly. I'm going to do the intros. I'm Layla, Dr. Layla Edwards, and I will be doing just a little bit of this, but it's mostly Phil, and that's how we actually work, because we have a number of courses we run, and our two main areas of teaching and training and running courses that we're now doing in association with Illuminations are in the field of applied positive psychology. And what we do on the one hand is train people as therapists and counselors and UK qualifications. And the other main thing that we do is NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which we're going to talk to you about today, and coaching, which goes hand in hand with that for those who want to be coaches as well. So this is, you'll see this throughout Illuminations. You probably know the logo, no doubt, from registering through Illuminations. This is us, Transformations. And this, when you see this, you'll see it a few times through the presentation. When you see that sign there, you see the one with all the colored flags going on around it? That's actually the Society of NLP. Now, there are many people who say they do NLP, many organizations, association, the British board of, the American board of, etc., etc. But the Society of NLP, I see somehow the wrong logos got used on there because there's a different flag. Maybe you've seen it already, but there's a one with the Scottish flag on, which we prefer to use in the Middle East. The one with the Israeli flag is not so popular here, but there are two versions of the different flags down there. But basically, that is the Society of NLP, and that means it's the Society of NLP was founded by Dr. Richard Bandler, who is the original creator of NLP and co-founded the society with his former collaborator, John Grinder. So if it's not that particular logo, even the flags might vary a bit, but the colored logo like that, that is Society of NLP. So anything that's taught by someone licensed and trained by Dr. Richard Bandler, the originator of NLP, then it's somebody else doing something they based on NLP, but it's not Dr. Bandler's actual NLP. So I just make that clear what we're talking about from the outset. Okay, so who are we? I'm, as I mentioned, Dr. Layla. Phil will be coming and introducing himself shortly. And we work in human development. And as I said, our strap line, if you like, is applied positive psychology. Whatever we do is based on that. We've been running the Institute. We've actually been in the Middle East for longer than 15 years, but we've actually been running the courses in our own business in the Middle East for 15 years. We've been here from about 17 years now, 17 and a half. First in Bahrain and then in the UAE. And we both worked we've worked as therapists, we've run centers, we've had a number of different roles, but our last roles in the UK before we came to the Middle East were as a dean and a director in a different university. And then our first job when we first came to the Middle East was actually setting up the first private university for women in the Middle East, and that's the Royal University for Women in Bahrain. And we very quickly found that there was a huge demand for the sorts of things that we did. There wasn't really anything else like it going on at the time. And so we started doing the work that we do, as I said, as a private organization. We do a lot of research and as well as educating. Mostly we've been involved in writing courses, not much other kind of writing recently, because all our focus the last few years has been training other people to do what we do, so that they can, as therapists and coaches, they can do that work. Some people want to learn to apply in their own lives, in their families, with perhaps as teachers, perhaps as health professionals, doctors, nurses, people in alternative fields, healers, etc., and also in the corporate sector. So these are the sorts of things that we do, and we have worked across that range from academia and healing and business. So we have quite a bit of scope between us. And the one thing I'd like to say here to focus on that, but not the very last one, but this one, is that Phil and I practice what we teach and preach. So when we're in lockdown, as we have been here, we were supposed to be back at our centre in Morocco as of March, and we've been here ever since our flight was cancelled back. And so we have had good chances to apply the positive psychology that we teach other people. And we managed to stay from being completely stir crazy. And we've actually put our emphasis on teaching and training online because we weren't in a position to do anything else. So we started a cognitive behavioral therapy course in early March that was a taught face-to-face course with people in a room. And then everything got shut down, as you know, so we had to finish the rest online. So that's been an interesting learning curve for us. The last one there, we actually work with international institutes and experts. So sometimes we bring other people over to the Middle East, but nowadays we get called over because, as I said, we have a centre in Morocco, and so we're based in the UK and Morocco and the in the UAE. I'll have to keep remembering not to just say Dubai because now we're also working in Abu Dhabi. Can I just ask, you can do a thumbs up or a wave or whatever at me. Are you all based in Abu Dhabi that are online right now, or some of you in Dubai or elsewhere?
I have been there.
So you're in Abu Dhabi?
No, I mean that I was there last time I was in Abu Dhabi. It was 2018, but I'm planning to go again to Abu Dhabi and at least I want to go to UAE again.
Illuminations only recently opened up a branch in Abu Dhabi, so this is all new. They've been very well established for a long time in Dubai, and that's why we're collaborating, because they're now opening or have opened this new center in Abu Dhabi, and they want to get that started up. So this is the first time that we've run NLP in Abu Dhabi since about 2012, I think, was the last time we ran a course there. So I'm just getting this. Okay, so Neuro-Linguistic Programming is the theme of what we're doing. As I said, there's many things I could talk to you about, but this is the theme of what we're doing today. When you see that global NLP up there, that's because under the Society of NLP, when we teach NLP, it comes under the brand of Global NLP as part of the Society of NLP. Whenever you see the Transformations Institute or that little flag down at the bottom there, which, as I mentioned, is the wrong flag, but it's very small, so that needn't bother you. But that's the Society of NLP, the coloured one. It's the one with the Israeli flag on. Yeah.
Leila, a quick question.
Yes.
A quick question. Are we going to get notes on this? Are you going to send the presentation on email or something later? Or because we're taking our notes?
You can take notes. We don't usually send we send out presentations when we're doing talk courses, but what Illuminations does is I think they make them available to anybody who wants to watch. They're recording it right now, as I understand it. And so if you want to have a look at it again, then you're welcome to. But we don't usually send out presentations unless it's a talk course where people need those notes for example, if they're doing an exam to get a certification or something like that. But we haven't talked to them about supplying.
So maybe we can have a link later to see what was learned.
Yes,
to
we'll
refresh
ask them. As I said, we're used to working with the Dubai office, but we'll ask the Abu Dhabi staff if they can make sure that anyone who registered this afternoon will get a link to that so they can have a look. I don't know how long they'll keep it online, but I'll certainly raise that question for you. If you can make a note of that. Phil's just come in, so he's going to make a note of that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for raising the question. Okay, so when it comes to NLP, and many people, as I said, teach in different ways. Even in the Dubai part of Illuminations, they have different NLP. It's not Society of NLP. It's not Richard Bandler Society of NLP. And it's taught in different ways. Some do level 1, level 2, level whatever. In Society of NLP, the way it's always been taught since Richard and John developed NLP in the 1970s, we have what we call the NLP Practitioner course, and that is the 7-day course, intensive, that some people spread it even longer, but that's the minimum it needs to be, and that's called Practitioner. You'll see it says NLP Foundation, and that's because sometimes people want to come along and have if you like, a taster, or an introduction to NLP, sometimes a workshop, sometimes even a couple of days. And because of the situation globally now, with the restriction on meetings in Abu Dhabi, for example, in June, we will be able to have this course run face-to-face, but there can be only a maximum of about 7 people, I think. And normally, obviously, we'd have a lot more people than that. We don't go in for huge groups, by the way. We like to give individual attention, but we usually have between 12 and 20 people on our NLP courses, but this one coming up in Abu Dhabi will just be 7 people for max. And what we're doing ourselves now, we have permission from Richard Bandler, is to do some of the foundations online so that people get an introduction, they get some of the basics so that they can come in. And then maybe during this period, if there's a situation where we can't go for and do a whole week, that we can do maybe a 4-day course, having already done foundations. So there is a possibility of doing foundations, but to get the actual piece of paper, the qualification, the NLP practitioner and license, which by the way, you can take around the world. If you were to be here now and then go to America or the UK or Europe or the Far East, as long as you have an NLP Society of NLP Practitioner certificate, you could then go and do the next level, which I'll talk about in a moment. You could do the Master Practitioner or the coaching certification. You could do that because any center will accept. So like if you did your degree in, say, Middlesex University in Dubai, that's still a degree from Middlesex University, UK, and you could go anywhere in the world to do a master's course as long as you had that accredited degree. Well, it's the same way with the NLP. If you have your NLP practitioner from another organization, then the trainer may do an assessment, may see if they think that you could do the masters with them, but you would never be able to become a Society of NLP trainer unless you've done both the practitioner and the master practitioner with the Society of NLP itself. So the next level, as I mentioned, is practitioners, master practitioner and coach. The master practitioner used to be a minimum of 8 days, from like a 9 till 5 or a 10 till 6 day. For the master prac, then we found many people said, look, I'll take some time out of work, but I don't want to go into a second week of time out. So now we do that as a 7-day course, but with 1 extra hour each day. So that means it's the equivalent of 8 days, but it's run over 7 days. So it would be from 9 till 6 instead of 9 till 5, or from 10 till 7 if we're doing it, starting a bit later. The coaching is relatively new. The coaching program only came in about 5 years ago. And that's because before that, there was an NLP business coach course and also a sports coach. But there was never what people nowadays call life coaching or health coaching, well-being coaching, education coaching. So now we have what we call a generic qualification. It means you could go and coach in any sector you like. So you learn all the basic tried and tested good models of coaching, but you do NLP within that, which takes, I have to say, takes coaching to a whole other level. I don't know if Phil will say something about that, or maybe I will later. But the reason for the coaching being different with NLP is that NLP is a great structure. It's a great model, but probably if you're interested in psychology and how the human mind works, you'll know that about 95 to even 99% of our mind is unconscious, is the subconscious mind. It's below the level of what you're consciously thinking about. And the problem with most coaching, we found, is that it's a great model, it all looks good, and then someone comes very enthusiastic and motivated. Yeah, I want to coach, I want to be coached, I want to change my life, and I want to enhance my performance. That's all great. But then after a bit, they start losing momentum, they start to get fed up, they go back into their old habits. And really, that's because the unconscious mind is what runs all our programmed responses. It's spent our whole lives actually learning how to do stuff so we don't have to do it consciously. And unfortunately, amongst all the good stuff, like being able to tie your shoelaces and drive a car and type and all the things you don't have to think about once you've learned how to do them, the subconscious mind actually also takes on board limiting beliefs, areas where you think, I'm no good at this, I never remember names, oh, I'll never be any good at maths, I'm not confident, all those sorts of limiting beliefs we have, and it just runs them over and over automatically. So NLP takes working with what we call coaching the unconscious as well as with the conscious mind. So we find that our coaches do really well, and they get great results because they're working with their clients not only at the conscious level, but at the level of the unconscious. We also do some short NLP courses, which are not certificated official qualifications, but to help people. So for example, for doctors and health professionals, nurses, physios, people who work in the field of health and well-being, it makes a huge difference the way that you talk to your clients, the positive expectations that your language uses, the way you relate to them in terms of body language, the way that you communicate with them. And interestingly, there's some research done not so long ago in positive psychology, which showed that doctors that are primed for happiness are, get this, twice as fast at reaching accurate diagnoses of their patients and more creative in their treatment of their patients than doctors who are not primed for happiness. So again, it just shows you how the right kind of priming psychologically, the right kind of emotional intelligence and communication skills, even as a doctor, even as a nurse, as someone who's in a completely different field, is able to get better results. And of course, most people know about NLP for selling and for marketing, for advertising, yes, but I like to sometimes emphasize those other areas as well. And this is another area too. Teaching, education, parenting. We used to run a course when we were here more and had more staffing, and we still have specialists who sometimes can come over. Something called Happy Kids, Happy You. NLP is absolutely brilliant for working with parents to help them to get kids to actually have higher self-esteem, to be more confident, to stop nagging them, to use the right kind of language to get the kids to cooperate. So it's a very popular course, and of course educators like to learn it too. There was in fact a project done in the north of England where officials, not just something private training organizations did, but some of you may have heard of Paul McKenna, quite a well-known NLPer, and does stage hypnotism and so on. But he funded it along with the local authority, and they took a number of schools in the northeast of England, in County Durham, and they put the trainers on one of these 2 or 3 day short programs to just teach them some NLP skills to use in the classroom with their kids. And it was absolutely fantastic, the results. And they wrote them up in something called the Durham Report. And the teachers found the kids behaved better in school, their behavior was better, their academic performance was better, and they were generally all round, enjoyed better relationships and communication between teacher and students. And that was across the board, by the way. This was primary and secondary, special needs schools, you name it. So it wasn't just for one particular kind of teacher or kid. It was actually the way that we relate, the way we communicate makes a big difference to the performance of children and to how happy they are, how settled they are, how much they feel appreciated and heard and listened to. And I mentioned already, so anything where you see any courses that we do that are accredited, so that's the first set of the first 2 lines, those lead to international qualifications. So they are actually qualifications where you get a certificate, you get a unique reference number that's registered with the society, and it's a qualification you can use on your CV or next to your qualifications. The latter ones, these are ones that are shorter courses, more skills-based, not for a qualification, but to enable you to be better at what you do. So we personally are highly recommended by Richard Bandler because he trained us personally, and anyone who wants to work with Richard Bandler has to actually not only train with him, but be video teaching and running NLP courses, and then have a look and see that you are up to the standard. So as I said, we are able to do that and deliver those courses. And there are a few, there's not many, but there are a few other people in the Middle East who are trained to teach the prac and the master prac. So far as we know, there is nobody else who is actually registered to train people as licensed coaches, because it's a newer qualification, because not that many of us have actually trained as coach trainers within the society. So that's Richard Bandler. There's various pictures of him around. He's been around quite a while. He's the same age as Phil and myself, actually. Many people will tell you it's known that NLP is considered to be the #1 system in the world. It's been around a long time, tried and tested. And if I tell you, I won't tell you the names because I don't know what your politics are, but on both sides of the political or spectrum of politics, let's say presidents, presidential candidates, very senior politicians, global leaders, people who are most of the CEOs and senior executives of the FTSE and 500, the top corporate sector companies have themselves been trained in NLP, or they're advised by people who are trained in NLP, because it's known to be very, very effective as a system. Unfortunately, some people have taken bits of it and they've watered it down. So we do sometimes come across people who tell us things and they say, oh, that's NLP, isn't it? And we go, well, no. The thing that Phil's going to tell you about a bit later on, eye accessing, and the way that we watch, the way that people's eyes move, the way they get information moving their eyes. Sometimes people tell us, oh yeah, we went on an NLP course workshop and they told us if someone looks up and to the right, they're telling you a lie. Well, that's just absolutely not the case. It's one of many elements that can be used in truth and lie detection, and that's something we're also trained in, but it is only one of many indicators. So it could be that someone is is thinking of something they'd like to do, they're being creative, they're imagining things. So it's not simplistic the way that sometimes it's put across to be. I wish it was that simple. So I'm going to hand over to Phil to actually give you a little bit of a history of NLP, again, to hopefully get you clear rather than being confused, because so many things, as I say, go NLP, NLP. So you will understand what we're talking about when we talk about NLP, and then he'll talk to you a bit about that, and then I'll do a practical exercise with you, then Phil will do another one, and if there are enough of you, I think there are a few, we might put them into breakout rooms to do the I-access and cues bit. Okay, all right, so I'm going to introduce you now to Phil. You've got several people here on screen, and if you scroll up, you'll see that there's others there. I think we have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably got about 7 or 8 people. I think someone's joined us a bit later. Actually, there's probably about 9 or 10 now. A few, Hadil, Maria, there's a few who've come in since I started. Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's okay, there's no need for you to say anything. I'll just assume that you've heard me and that you're all pleased to see me. I'm just going to have a look at the faces. We've got lots of names and no video here. So if you could turn on your video, that would be great, because one of the things about NLP is it's very much about interaction with people, and what in NLP we call calibrating, which is, there's a lot of depth and detail in calibration, but it's concerned with reading the information that people are constantly giving off unconsciously by expressions and by body language for all of these things. Now, I think Layla's done, I've just walked in, so I think Layla's done the kind of general background introduction. So we always say, when people come to do NLP with us, we always say, for the time that you're on the course, please do not Google about NLP. So this obviously does apply to you. This is just an introductory, but there is a huge, like so many things at the moment, there's a huge amount of information about everything on the internet. And of course, some of it is wonderful and some of it is awful, and then there's everything in between. So I think Layla's told you we worked with the original guy who first ever did the research and created it, or co-created it, which is Dr. Richard Bandler. So we like to stay with that origin. Now, you can see all these things flashing up here because I haven't got control of the mouse yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through some background so you know where it came from and what it was originally and so on. And I don't know what you already know, obviously, or what other systems you may have looked into or so on. Often when we were doing these introductory events live, which we've done for probably 15 years or so in this region, we would always say to people, you know, just have a hands up, you know, who knows, what does anybody know about NLP? And, you know, very typically we'd have a couple of people say, I've read a book, you know, so you may be somebody's read a book, or you may be somebody's done an entire NLP course. So we'll give you a little bit of the, this mouse has a life of its own. I'm going to go to the keyboard. Okay, so originally what happened is Richard Bandler was a psychology student at the University of Santa Cruz in California, and what he did is he had a kind of a part-time job, or a series of part-time jobs as students often do, and because he was a psychology student, he looked to have a part-time job that had something to do with psychology. So one of the things he did, I'll bring the key names up now, is if you're seeing something like I'm seeing, you're probably going to have to move your gallery around to be able to see the slides clearly. But one of the things he did is he had a job as a general, he was a driver and a general kind of assistant for this person, which is Virginia Satir. Now, Virginia Satir invented family therapy. It didn't really exist until she came along. So this was California in the 70s. It was a hotbed of radical inquiry into psychology and therapy in many different ways. So Virginia was doing her work, and he would accompany her. He would drive her to her trainings and workshops. He would drive her back again. And during the time, he would hang out at the workshops because, you know, what else was there to do? And as a psychology student, it was very fruitful for him. So he got to study her firsthand. And he noticed certain things about Virginia. One of the things he noticed is the way she interacted with people physically, but also the kind of language which she used. And we'll return to that after a while. Now, while he was pursuing this kind of angle of looking at language, because it's called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, so language is a big part of it, he also started to look at the work of this guy. This is Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson, again, he's seminal in the movement, he's seminal in the world of psychology, because he more or less invented something that's now generally known as brief therapy. Milton didn't want people to be coming to see him for months or years. He wanted them to have a few sessions, get fixed and go home. And this is Fritz Perls. He was in fact already dead by the time Bandler came along, but he studied the tapes as they were at the time, videotapes of Fritz Perls. Now each of these people did something key. So Erickson had this concept of brief therapy, moving through things quickly, and Virginia Satir had family therapy and working with families and collections of people in that way. And Fritz Perls invented something which became known as Gestalt therapy, which is basically the idea of relating to people even when they're not there. So this is very useful for people you can't really resolve things with. Maybe they've passed away, or maybe they're at a great distance, or maybe they just refuse to talk to you or something. And so using the Gestalt approach, you can get to explore what might be useful to you in your own mind and your own emotions. So Bandler was looking at all three things. Now, he noticed something, and this is key to how NLP later developed. These three were outstanding insofar as they all got outstanding results, head and shoulders above many of the other schools and therapists at the time. The interesting thing was to Bandler that they were totally different. Their method of working was different, their ideology was different, their beliefs were different, everything was different. Their systems were different, but he noticed they seemed to have one thing in common, and that was that they used language in a certain way. And so what he did is he took all his research to Dr. John Grinder, who was a professor of linguistics at the same university, and said to him, I think there's something about these people. The reason they get the success they get is not because of why they think they get it, it's because of the language they use. The language that does it. If you use language in a certain way, it makes certain things happen. This was a completely new idea in the field of psychology. And so he took this to Grinder and he went through it and he studied it and analysed it, and he said, I think you're right. So this was the beginning of their working together, their partnership. And it was also the beginning of a completely new idea in this field, in the field of human relations and human development, which was a kind of a fusion, a marriage of psychology and linguistics, which really had not happened up until that point. If you're into philosophy, you'll see that some philosophers have talked about the idea of language and the impact it can have on people, and that goes back a long way. But that was philosophy, and philosophy tends to be quite detached from ordinary life. You have to be a philosopher to be involved in it, or a philosophy student. Whereas these were hands-on people with hands-on situations. That was back in the 70s. Now, since then, so they worked together for, I think it was about 10 years or so. But in 1980, they went their separate ways. So Bandler and Grinder both had different ideas about certain things, and they separated. And since they separated, so they both sort of developed their own kind of NLP then. Well, I say developed their own. I think basically John Grinder seems to have kind of tweaked it a bit, and I'll say more about that. And then after that, what happened is that, as it says here, if you look for NLP now, you'll find there are at least hundreds and maybe thousands of organizations, schools, associations, individuals, all doing their own thing. Some of which, now one of the most successful of these people, and probably one of the best, most effective, which is maybe why he's so successful, is Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins, sort of, if you haven't heard of Tony Robbins, go Google him. He's a very interesting person. Got some very interesting things to say about COVID at the moment, amongst all the other work that he's done over many years. He's very well known, so you probably have heard of him. But he calls his thing, he still calls his thing NLP, but he calls it Neuro-Linguistic Psychology, which is sort of cheating in a way. But what he's done is he's taken these basic principles that Bandler identified and then made available to people, and he's merged those with other things. So, and they've given it a slightly different name. So what we do is we work with the original. Now, we always do this. I think Lena may have said a few things about other people that we work with, and schools and systems. Wherever possible, we go to the source. Now, you can't always do that because sometimes the source is no longer with us. But in this case, Richard Bandler is very much alive and kicking, and in more ways than one. And so we went to Richard Bandler, we got trained by him, and so we joined the Society of NLP. So we teach Richard Bandler's original NLP. Now, this is not to say there's not good things in other forms of NLP. We just like to get the original, that's all, and go to the source and be clear about things. So here's how, this is a quick diagram to give you an idea of how things sort of generally developed since then. So in the beginning, you had Bandler and Grinder, they got together, they created NLP. You see things coming and going here. It seems to be a very strange mouse I've got hold of it. Now, so they created the original thing together, the original NLP, there it is together, and then when they separated, Grinder did something that he calls new code NLP. Now I'll say a little bit about that shortly. So he came up with the concept of new code NLP. Now Grinder, when you hear him say classic code NLP, he's referring to the original NLP, which he and Bandler originally created. So that's the original NLP. He calls it classic code. Just so you know, after I've told you this, you can forget all about it if you like, but we like to give people some kind of map of how things have been, so that there's not just a kind of vagueness and confusion about these things. Now, Bandler got together with somebody called John Lavelle, and they continued to teach his original NLP. Bandler's the originator, the CEO, as it were, of the whole organization. Lavelle is the president. And they refer to their original NLP as pure NLP. So I hope that's all clear now. We'll test you on it later, much later. So the original NLP is called by Grinder new code, and it's called, his own thing is called new code, and he calls the original thing classic code, and Bandler calls it pure NLP. So if you come across, if you look out there and see pure NLP, that's going to be Bandler's original thing. And if it wasn't, then Bandler would probably be very, very litigious in the USA. Now, I'll just say about the word about the new code. Now, we always go to the source, so that's why we went to Bandler, because he was the guy who did it first of all, very, very earliest days, as far as we can tell. And also something about new code NLP is that Grinder came up with the idea that some people, even though they're practicing a technique of mind, which is intended to get them out of their habitual, ritualistic ways of thinking, because that's a big issue we have as human beings. Our minds just run on automatic, like robots inside. We find it very difficult to actually come up with anything new, and we tend to run in the same circles. Why people have the problems they have, if somebody with a phobia could generate a different way of thinking and feeling about the phobia would disappear. And this is true of so many things, and this is one of the ways in which NLP is very practical and very useful. But Grinder came up with the idea that some people, even though they had this amazing tool, they still managed to kind of fall back into the old habit patterns. And then he said, so what he did is he developed another way of doing it, which would enable people, stop people from doing that, stop people from falling back into the same old patterns. But then he also says later that despite the fact that he did that, there were people who still fell back into the same patterns. So now, to me, this is a contradiction. It's just a logical contradiction. If you've invented something that is intended to do a certain thing, and then it doesn't do that thing, well, then you haven't invented anything new. So you're still going back in the same loop. So again, that's a reason for us why we go with Bandler. So what does NLP actually mean? Now, here's the story that Richard tells, and Richard tells many, many, many stories, and we use stories in NLP. We use them in very specific ways. Remember, this is about language. Anybody who works in therapy or coaching, or anybody who's a teacher at all of any kind, knows the value of a good story. So we use stories in many ways. We have specific structures in the language, so that we get effects on people that they don't know are happening. We get effects into the unconscious mind, while the conscious mind is listening to the story. The unconscious mind is taking on board the information we want them to take on board for their benefit. But this is the story that Bandler tells of how the whole thing originated. So he says he was stopped by a cop for speeding. And asked what his profession was. Well, this is often what cops do. Now, you have to put this in context. If you don't know any US history, I'll give you a quick lesson, which is back in the 70s. Being a student was more or less synonymous with one or two things. You were either a radical revolutionary, or you were on serious drugs, and so, or sometimes both. That was what it was like in the USA in the 70s. Not for everybody, but there was a huge student movement, and people were dropping out, and they were demonstrating against all these things. So actually, saying you're a student wasn't necessarily a good idea in California in the 70s if you were stopped by a cop. So he didn't want to say he was a student. So this is how he tells the story. He was very eclectic. He was interested in many different things. And so he had books on a number of different topics. And this is what they were. And he looked at the books lying on the floor, wondering what to say. And he looked at these three things and he said, I'm a Neuro-Linguistic Programmer. Richard tells us that's how the concept came about, just in a moment of desperation. He thought very quickly and he came up with something else he could tell the cop. And apparently the cop had no idea what it was. And of course, neither did Richard, because he just created it at that moment. But it was good enough, so the cop could just hear those words and say, oh, okay, fine. Now, this is one of the things about language, isn't it? Is that if you can get the right word, you can switch people on and you can switch them off. You can stop them from buying the thing you want to sell them, or you can get them to really want to buy that thing. You can stop them understanding you, you can help them understanding it. And often it's just a word, very, very simple word. And there are many words like this. I won't go into depth at the moment, but I mean, with the whole COVID thing we're going on at the moment, you only have to say COVID to get an automatic emotional and mental and physical sometimes response from millions, possibly billions of people. And you can get these same effects by saying other certain words which are charged. You know, words have a charge. You know, if you're a vegan and you say, I think I'll have a steak or something, you're going to get an emotional and psychological effect from that person. And the reverse is also true. You know, if the vegan says, oh, I'm going to have a really bad tonight, the meat eater is going to have a certain emotional reaction. There are many aspects to this, and I'm just giving you the most kind of superficial examples. So that was his definition at the moment of intensity. So what actually is it? So let's just analyze these words. Now in English, when we want to, and in all European languages, Western European languages, when we want to sound clever, when we want to do something, and this is true in science and medicine and so on, philosophy and so on, we take the word from an ancient language that nobody speaks anymore. We usually take it from either Latin or from Greek, because these are the two societies that founded European society. So that's why you have these words which you wouldn't normally see. Now, you might be familiar with this, you might not. I always like to explain, because, you know, some people are familiar, some are not, and it doesn't matter if you are or you're not. It's just a word, and it's what the word means. It's the important thing. So neuro usually refers to the brain. You'll hear people talk about neurochemistry, neurobiology, neurological, and so on. Neurotransmitters. But when we say the word neuro in NLP, we don't just mean the brain, we mean the entire nervous system, because there is no separation from your brain and your nervous system. If you're learning anatomy, they'll say you have a brain, and they'll teach you about the brain. And then they'll say you have a nervous system, and they'll teach you about the nervous system. They shouldn't really do that. There's not a holistic way of thinking about it. It's the same thing. It's a continuous system throughout your entire body. Now, and that's an important factor. That's a very important factor, because that's what we work with in NLP when we get to coding, communication, and experience. Because an important thing to understand about NLP, when it's understood well and practiced well, is that you can achieve things in 5, 10, 15 minutes that sometimes people cannot achieve in years. This is literally true. We've been doing this routinely for a decade and a half, and so are many, many other people. So if you've been absolutely terrified of getting in a lift, or absolutely terrified of spiders or something, you can just kiss that goodbye. You know, we've got videos showing how easily and quickly this can work. So that's that aspect of it. Now the linguistic aspects, language and non-verbal communication systems. Now this all sounds a bit clever, through which neural representations, and neural representation is a picture in your brain. You can say mind if you like, it's a picture inside you. And we do know now from all the neuroscience and the brain scanning, we know where different things actually take place. In NLP and in some areas of psychology, people have known this for decades and decades. But recently, you know, science has kind of caught up with what people were directly perceiving. We now have machines that can prove it's true, which is always useful, isn't it? I like to be able to quote neuroscience and say, yes, this scientist did this, and we now know this. Neural representation, the pictures you have in your mind. Now, the pictures you have in your mind, we have pictures about absolutely everything. They have to be coded. When information comes to us, we code it in a certain way. You know, when you hear my voice is being coded in your mind, in your brain. Something in your brain is deciding what kind of a voice it is, what the person it belongs to might look like, what it might mean to them, if it reminds them of somebody, if it reminds you of somebody, what some of the words I'm saying might remind you of. All that is happening below your level of consciousness. So it's all happening in the 95% of the brain or mind, which is unconscious. And it will do all that, and it will just come up with a meaning for you. And thank God it does. If we had to do that ourselves, we'd never get anything done. This is what the subconscious mind is for. It's what the 95% is for, is to do all this stuff. The important thing to understand here, it's not just like you hear a word and you get a meaning and that's that. This stuff is being done by your unconscious mind. And that's what we want to work with in NLP. It's being coded, it's being put into a certain order, and it's being given meaning. The things will be given meaning according to all kinds of other factors. Now, these meanings are in some ways sometimes useful for us, and in other ways, in other times, they are very destructive. If we go back to the simple and obvious example of a phobia, what is the use of being always afraid of spiders? It's an absolutely useless and, in fact, destructive meaning to have for spiders. The only spider you need to be afraid of is a tarantula or a redback, or some of these things they have in Australia or something. And you're not really going to have those in your life much, unless you go and live in Australia in the outback, and then I recommend you don't do that. Programming. So that's programming. So really, this is a bit that's taken. So you can see where this ties in as the original story. So program is the bit that's taken from the idea of computers, which are just sort of starting to get off the ground in the 70s. It is possible for us to organize these systems inside ourselves to get better things to happen. So if you want to be able to work in the zoo, but the spider house is next to the where you have to go to the canteen, to the cafeteria, then you might decide not to work in a zoo. And your PhD in zoology will be wasted. However, if you can just get rid of that thing, you'll find your own business. You can go and work in the field you want. You can go to the cafeteria, and you'll be fine. Now, I'm giving you a kind of a silly example, a humorous example, and that's intentional, because we tend to remember silly things, and we tend to remember humorous things. But you get the idea. If you have a phobia about lifts, and the job you apply for is on the 35th floor, that might be a problem for you. If you didn't have that feeling about lifts, you could just get the job and get on with it. If you want to have a fulfilling relationship, personal, intimate, lifelong relationship with somebody, and you're looking for the right person to have that with, if you have a sort of a phobic or neurotic response towards people of the other sex, that could get in the way. You want to be able to just go up and talk to people. So these are all kind of obvious examples, perhaps, what we can do. Now, some of the things I'm talking about are things that would also be addressed in therapy, various kinds of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnotherapy, emotional intelligence therapy. I mean, there's a million kinds of therapy, emotional freedom techniques. There are so many things, and it's true that they can all be addressed. There's a fundamental difference in the way NLP and therapy address issues, and it's this: the similarities and the differences. Now, the basic concept here behind the two systems is that therapy asks why. So if you go to a therapist and you say, I'm afraid of spiders, they will say why. And you might say, because when I was 5 years old, a spider dropped on my head while I was having lunch, and the therapist said, good, it's great that nothing happens, it's great that you know what it is, so let's work with it. On the other hand, you might say, I've got absolutely no idea. All I know is I get really frightened just thinking about spiders. Now that's when they'll have to do something. The analytic technique, hypnotherapy is good for this. Get the person into hypnosis, take them through age regression, get them to go back to the earliest experience they had. When they get that experience, then they can change it once they've changed it. So all of that, that's all great stuff. NLP, though, has a completely different approach. We're not saying one is necessarily better than the other, but what we can say is that NLP can often be really fast. Now, it might be that at some point it's still useful for you to take a therapeutic approach. You never say that shouldn't happen, as some people do. However, NLP is fast. We fix stuff, and we fix it fast. And then that enables you to get on with your life. And then once you get on with your life, then you'll be into other things in more depth. But we ask how. Now, this is where it's really different. And as you get into NLP now, one of the things to start to do, if you haven't done it already, is to begin to get to grips with the idea of thinking about things differently. When we say how, we would say, how do you frighten yourself about spiders? We don't say when did it happen or why you're afraid or anything else. We just say, how do you do it? Now, that may sound weird because many people say, well, don't do it, it just happens. But what we're talking about, this is where we get the difference, that makes the difference, is that in order for you to be afraid of a spider, you have to have a representation in your mind. You have to have a picture, and you have to talk to yourself, and you have to generate feelings, and you have to have a meaning for spiders. All of that happens inside you. That's the how. Now, that's the bit we work on in NLP. We don't work on the why. We just look at the how. We find out how you do it. How do you make yourself depressed? How do you make yourself shy? How do you make yourself afraid? How do you make yourself angry? How do you make yourself sick? Sometimes you can also even get rid of physical illnesses. I've done it many times, and I know other people who have, because physical illnesses often overlap, as we all know, with emotional states and psychological states. So we're going to ask how, and then we're going to work in a different way. Now, if this was a live event and I was looking at it.
Sorry, Phil, may I please interrupt just before you start this slide? It's because it's really interesting, but I think a few of us are just having a bit of a hard time hearing clearly.
Oh, are you? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know if I can change that.
It's all right, and it's in the chat, so it's hard to see when you're speaking. It's just maybe if you're just speaking a little bit more closely to the mic.
More closely. How's this?
I think for me that's working better. I don't know about everyone else. I think there are a few.
Yeah, just talk to me if you need to, because I'm not looking at the chat.
Okay.
The trouble with Zoom, I find, is that you get all these boxes that go across the presentation, you know.
Yeah, and you can't figure out which one to look at, but I think that's a bit better.
Is that better? I'm just leaning forward, basically. I mean, my volume.
Someone else has said it's better as well.
Good, okay, because my volume's up full, so I don't think I can do anything else there. But please tell me. Thank you for telling me that, and that goes for everybody. Just tell me if you need to. Now, I know I am speaking fairly quickly, and I'm sorry about that, but that's because I do have to get quite a lot of information across in a fairly short time. I didn't notice, who was that who just spoke?
Sonia.
Sonia. Hi, Sonia. Where are you? I'm just looking at the names here. Sonia. Hi, Sonia. There you are. Right, we've got Sonia, we've got Karen, and everybody else is a bit shy, I think. Let's have a look.
Can you repeat? What did you ask?
I'm sorry, what? Oh,
what did you ask? I didn't.
Vice Charlie. What did I ask?
Because you are now asking about, are you looking for volunteers or what? What is happening? Because you are telling the name of the people and so on.
No, I don't want volunteers. We might have volunteers later. No, I don't want volunteers at the moment. I was just saying it's good if people show their face, so that I can get some feedback. I can see how people are responding from time to time.
If you could sit forward a little bit, it would really help.
If what?
If you could
I lean forward again.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Well, after this one, we'll check and see if there's anything else we can do apart from leaning forward. But at the moment, that's the only thing I know I can do. I don't like leaning forward too much. I think once your face gets really big in the screen, it can be a bit off-putting sometimes. But if that's okay, I'll stay at this range. I also don't like seeing myself with the top of my head missing. It's just a thing, it's just a thing I've got. Heads. Anyway, back to business, if you're okay with this so far. Now, there's a few key concepts in NLP, which we're going to have a look at. Now, some of these ideas, if you've looked at other systems of therapy and so on, you will find some of these things have leaked across into other areas of therapy. And one of the reasons we like to be clear, because we teach a lot of different things, and we have done for a long, long time. But we like people to be clear about what is what. Many people now have no idea what the difference is between coaching or therapy. Many people don't know what the difference is between therapy and NLP and so on. There are differences. And although we can blend these things and merge them and get creative and create synergy, it's also good to be clear, because sometimes, I've seen this happen, sometimes it can backfire when people don't understand the distinctions and the differences. And they start working in a certain way with somebody, and then something happens that they don't know how to deal with it. So it's quite good to be clear about these things. So Here's some of the key ideas. Now, in NLP, we have what we call a set of presuppositions. Now, I like to say that the presuppositions are like the 10 Commandments, except that there's only 8, and they're not commandments, basically. But what the presuppositions are is that what you might call, if you were doing philosophy or something, you'd sort of call them maxims or principles. You know, they're key ideas that other things are based on. And we'll have a look at those in a moment, because, you know, one of the things we say in this work is some ways of thinking are more powerful than others. That's not really from NLP, that's from something called dimensional macrostructural alignment. But that idea, I think, is a really important idea. And, you know, Einstein is credited with having said that you can't solve a problem by thinking about it in the same frame of mind as when you created it. And I think that's a really important point. So we have a set of presuppositions which are different ways of looking at things, different fundamental principles. We've got 2 language models. Now, it's called linguistic programming. One of the things we found in badly taught NLP over many years now, when you find it being done badly, is people don't understand the language models. They're not rocket science, you know, everybody can understand them. We all use them every day. It's just that we don't know we're using them until we study them. It's a bit like your brain. You've got no idea what goes on in your brain till you start looking at some neuroscience, you know, and then you know. But it didn't stop you using it. But once you do know what's going on, then you can change things and you can use it more effectively. So there's what we call the meta model, and then there's the Milton model. Now, the meta model is used for analysis. This is used for getting information and getting more accurate information, more useful information, richer, deeper information. This is some of these elements of NLP, like the meta model. Now, you could be a lawyer or a teacher or have any professional manager, and it would be worth you learning the meta model, even if you never learned any NLP, because the meta model will enable you to get the best out of the people you're working with. And you can use the meta model along with other things. So, you know, and this is what some people have done. You know, they've taken a bit of NLP that works really well, and they've written a book about it, given it a new name, pretended it's something new and different. You know, they've called it, you know, the Smith technique or something. You know, and then they've gone out there, and they've sold their books and run their seminars and everything. We always like to give credit where it's due. You know, somebody invented this stuff, and they should be acknowledged for that. And then there's the Milton model, which you might have noticed, we talked about Milton Erickson, that's actually named after Milton Erickson, because one of the things that Bandler noticed studying Milton is the idea of getting results more easily and quickly, is that if you speak to people in a certain way, it moves them in a certain direction. I mean, you may know some of these things anyway, like in sales, for instance, one of the classic sales techniques is to get you to say yes 3 times in a row. And the reason for that is that it's easier for you to say yes a 4th time. Now, it doesn't matter what you're saying yes about, as long as I get you to say yes and I get you nodding and agreeing with me, because if I get you to say yes, things happen in your neurology and things happen in your chemical process in your body. Because when you say yes, you feel good. When you say yes, you transmit certain neurotransmitters. When you say yes, your body, all sorts of things happen. You know, your muscles relax. So the more you're in a relaxed state, the more you're likely to go for the thing when I spring it on you. So that's a sort of a classic sales technique that's it's a bit outdated now, but you know, people still use it. I mean, listen out for it. You know, next time you go to buy a car or a shirt or anything else, you know, listen out for that, because people still do that stuff, and it still works. And it works because human functioning is 95% unconscious. So once you get that unconscious acceptance going, just drop in the thing you want. Listen to politicians if you can bear it. Listen to politicians, because you'll find they use all these rhetorical devices. One of the classic devices, an NLP language pattern that politicians love, is what we call a bind. That's where you give people a choice of 2 things. You know, like, you know, you can either, one they're all doing at the minute, you can either stay home all the time, or you can die a terrible death from COVID. You know, those are your 2 choices, right? They don't give you 3 choices, 4 choices, 5 choices. They give you 2. And when Bush wanted to get everybody to go and kill lots of innocent people in the Middle East, he did something similar. If you remember his speech, but he stood up and he said this to the world, you know, it was all over the networks, and he said, you're either with us or against us. That's not true, is it? It's not true. But as a language pattern, it works really well, because people's minds automatically go, that's my choice, you know. And if you have children, again, you might know this already. If not, it's worth getting into. because there's children's NLP, you know, there's NLP for children, it works really well. You know, never ask them what they want for dinner or lunch, just give them a choice of 2 things that you want them to have for lunch, because you're probably going to make healthier choices than them, right? So don't say, what do you want for lunch? So that they can say a McDonald's or, you know, a bar of chocolate. Say to them, would you like peas or beans? You know, that's just give them 2 choices. Do you want to tidy up your room now or after lunch? You know, and I mean, there are all sorts of technicalities about how this language works. Just to, you know, sort of touch on it. And then we have the idea of a process of change. How do we change? Everybody wants to change. Everybody, well, most of us, we want to change for the better. How do our beliefs prevent that? And again, in NLP, we look at beliefs not as just a kind of a thing like, oh, you have a belief. We look at what's the structure of a belief, and we go into that because there is a structure to absolutely everything that goes on inside us. And states. You find people often talking about feeling, feel this, feel that. We talk about states. So a state is everything that's going on in you physically, psychologically, emotionally at the same time. Because you can't have any one part of it without the other parts. You can't have an emotion without accompanying thoughts. And you can't have those thoughts without your body physically changing in some way. And your body can't physically change without certain chemicals being dispersed throughout your system. So that's a state. A state is the whole thing. And changing states is very important in NLP. Sometimes it's all you need to do. All you need to do is change somebody's state, and suddenly they understand something that they didn't understand before. You know, the aha moment. I love doing this stuff because you just get so many. I've seen people so many times just get, you know, big changes fast. Okay, so I'm just gonna talk through some of the presuppositions. There are 8 of them. And I won't do all of them, but if you see one and you like the look of it, and you want me to tell you a bit about it, I can do that. I think we have time for that. But here they are. So if you think of these, you know, the 8 commandments of NLP. Now, one of the reasons that we say to people, you know, stay away from Google when you do our courses, you know, go Google afterwards, you know, stay away from them. And one of the reasons that we're a bit critical about maybe some other systems and so on is because this is a simple thing. There's 8 presuppositions. But if you go out there and you look at different organizations, there's some have got 18, some have got 26, some have got 12, you know, and what you'll find mostly is it's not that what they've done is come up with some radical new revolutionary understanding. What they've done is they've taken the 8 and they've split them in, you know, they split them in 2 and they've come up with 16, you know, or they've taken one of them and divided it into 3 and added that on. So you will find all sorts of funny things that do that. No, I was going to tell you my pet hate of non-presupposition. I've decided not to. I don't want to send you off on that pathway. You'll find them for yourself if you haven't already. But these are the original 8, and in all the decades now, ever since the 70s, Richard Bandler has not found any reason to come up with new ones. And it's not that he hasn't come up with other new things. It's just that, you know, these pretty much cover what you need. So here's a key. These are all key. These underpin everything we do in NLP. Can't do anything unless you take these on board. You can learn all the sort of techniques and the tricks and the language, but if you don't embody these in the way you behave, relate, communicate, you won't really get the results that you want to get with NLP. The ability to change the process by which we experience reality. Okay, this all sounds a bit complex, I think, when you first hear it. This is saying, as we said earlier on, we have representations of reality in our minds. It's not the reality that makes us behave a certain way, it's the representation. So for instance, if you've had an argument with your loved one and your loved one has walked out the door, and since they walked out the door, they have remembered how much they love you, and you know, they just think you're wonderful, and they've forgiven you, and they're thinking all these beautiful things about you, they're remembering all the great times you've had together while they're driving their car to the shop or wherever they're going. But in your mind, you've still got the representation of how they were just before they left, and you keep up that representation. What happens when they come back in the door? You don't relate to them as they actually are in that moment. You relate to your representation of them. Now again, I think that's a very sort of straightforward, simple example that everybody can relate to, because we all do that. Now,
hello, can I ask?
Yeah.
You mean I understood the representation as an interpretation. Right, it's the same thing than like, I mean that when I'm getting an interpretation someone's behavior and it's not true, it's just only my interpretation what I'm
No, that's
making,
not what we're saying. No, that's really not what we're saying. It's very different. This is what I was saying about you know how NLP is different. We ask how. We are talking about the way we represent it to us. Now, it may not be your interpretation may be correct. Maybe they were being really nasty. Maybe they were intentionally being unpleasant to you. Maybe they do that sometimes, and they were being absolutely horrible because they wanted to hurt you because they're in that mood. Okay, so we're not saying it's your interpretation, because
Excuse me,
people
doctor.
do bad things. They're not lovely all the time. What we're saying is,
Can we have please more examples?
Let me just complete this, because this is key, and then we can come back on it if you like. But what we're saying is, it's your representation in your mind that you are having an emotional response to, that you are thinking about, and that's making you behave the way you behave. It's your representation. Your brain, and this is where neuroscience really helps us out, your brain does not know the difference between data coming from outside and data coming from inside. It responds the same. It generates all the same neurotransmitters, the same chemicals, the same reactions in the muscles, and the same thoughts. They all happen the same. So it's not about interpretation, it's about how you represent it, the picture you hold, and what you do with that picture. Thank you for listening. I did just want to complete that point. What was your comment on that?
Yeah, actually, I didn't actually get that so well, that this difference, but maybe you can open up it later a little bit wider, in a wider meaning.
Yeah, we can talk about it more, but it's an important distinction in NLP, because see, NLP is very kind of simple in a way. You know, we're just what we're really saying is, we're just saying, look, you hold stuff in your mind, you run movies in your mind, and that normally happens automatically. And what we can do is we can change the movies. But there's a structure to that. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, you know, like people do affirmations when they'll stand in front of the mirror going, I am beautiful, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful. You know, their face probably doesn't change. You know, they go, you know, I can, I don't know, you know, you could stand there, you could tell yourself thousands of times that you can drive a car, but unless you actually get to grips with the structure of driving a car, you won't be able to drive. Now, it's true that having a positive attitude towards being able to drive will be helpful, but that by itself is not going to make it happen. So this is what we're concerned with NLP, is that there is an internal structure. There is a way that the brain does these things. And once we know the way that it puts these things together, then we can organize it in ways that are better. So I hope that makes sense. You said you got that already, so I guess it did. The meaning of the communication is in the response that you get. Now, we also like to say sometimes, God, I can't believe this mouse. We like to say sometimes the value of the communication. Now, what that means is, for instance, if you're a teacher and you explain something to one of your students, if they don't understand it, that is your responsibility, not theirs. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're not paying attention. It's not because they don't want to learn. I mean, it might be, but from a practical point of view, you can't really change that. That has to change in them. But what you can change is how well you communicate. And maybe you can find a way of communicating that takes into account their laziness. Maybe it takes into account the fact they don't really want to learn. Perhaps they shouldn't be there learning in the first place. But the idea here is, it's not just assuming that the other people don't understand, or you know, they're doing something wrong. It's taking complete responsibility for your own communication. How can I improve my communication? There are lots of simple technical things about this too, because you will find that people often completely change the word. We all do it. Somebody says, I'm worried about so-and-so, and we say, oh, so you're anxious about so-and-so. That isn't what they said. They said they were worried. Now, worried has a meaning for them, which is their own personal specific meaning. They didn't say anxious. So as soon as we start to change the words, we how the best way to put this, we impede our communication. So this again is key in the way that we use this information in NLP. Now I'm going to jump through. If you want me to home in on one, I will. Otherwise, I'll sort of choose a couple of my favorites, because we all have our favorites. When we do this, when you learn NLP with us, we always say to people, rather than struggle to get to grips with everything at once, choose your favorites. Get one of those and just practice that every day. I mean, like this one, like number 2. Try really paying attention to your communication. really listen to people, really notice what you're giving back to them and how you give it back, and then find out what happens. The resources an individual needs in order to affect change are already within them. Now, this I think should be, fundamental to any sort of person-centered approach. It's already inside us. We've all done incredible things at some point, and often those things are things that we no longer think are incredible. Like, we can all walk and we can all talk, but have a look at a newborn baby and take yourself back. What was it like when you first actually stood up and stayed standing? That was an incredible thing. It mobilized everything in you. Now, that ability to mobilize everything in us is still there if we can find a way to tap into it. The map is not the territory. Now, this is actually my personal favorite. Originally, this came from somebody else. This came from outside of the three founders that we showed you. This came from somebody called Korzybski, who's a very interesting character, and you can get most of his stuff free online now because it's all out of copyright and everything. But he invented a whole field of inquiry called general semantics, which is about meaning and how we make meaning. So you can see why it would appeal to Bandler. Because Bandler did look at a number of other people and other things, feed those things in. It's just that those three therapists were the core. So the map is not a territory means this. Once we understand that we're not experiencing reality, and I don't mean this in some mystical sense, I mean it in a very practical sense. That spider, let's go back to that spider. You're not experiencing that spider, the reality is not there. It's your map, it's your representation of the spider. When somebody has a phobia of spiders, for instance, they only need a little one. They don't need a giant tarantula. They're a tiny little thing that they could just stamp on, and they're just as afraid. So it's the representation. Now, when we say the map is not the territory, we're saying this. All of us make maps of reality. We code information, we structure information, we collect stuff from outside, we mix it up with all the stuff that we have inside, we get a few other people's opinions and ideas, we throw that in the pot, and then we make a map of what a person is, or a map of what a religion is, or a map of what a job is, or whatever. We do this in the whole of life. But the map is not the territory. What's out there is not what's in here. Now, obviously, it's similar. It approximates to it, and that's what enables you to get through life with that map. Because if your map didn't match at all, you'd be in trouble. If you had a map that said that walls were insubstantial and you were going around walking into walls, you'd be in big trouble. But you don't. You have a map that says walls are solid, and that's why you don't walk into walls except by accident. However, in many other areas of life, we do walk into things. We walk into dysfunctional relationships, we walk into agonizing ways of earning a living, we walk into illness when we don't need to be ill. All sorts of things happen because the map is not the territory. I'll come back to that one because it is my favorite. I'll just show you these unless you intervene. This one is always very interesting as well. There's always a positive intention. Now, that doesn't mean the person is positive by our definition. That doesn't mean they're a nice person or a good person. It doesn't mean any of that. But we're saying there's a positive intention from their point of view. When you're in downtown LA and some guy comes up to you and sticks a gun in your ribs and demands your money, they've got a positive intention, not from your point of view, but from their point of view. They are doing their best to get something they really need or think they really need within their own understanding. So when somebody goes and has some terrible chemical treatment for an illness, which they don't need to have because maybe there's like 1,000 other ways to treat it, they have a positive intention. They want to heal themselves. However, their map is a very limited map. Their map only has one treatment in it. I hope this is working for you, just giving those kind of examples. And you can think about them yourself, about how this could be true in many other situations. A child, if you have children or you're around children, when they're screaming and stamping their feet and sobbing and doing all the horrific things children do around about the age of 2 usually, from their point of view, they are trying to get something that they think they need. But maybe they do need it, maybe they don't. But there's a positive intention there. So the behavior is not positive, sure. But one of the things we can do, if we can find out, and again, this is where the meta model is so useful, if we can find out what the actual positive intention is behind that behavior, then we can work with that instead of struggling with the behavior. Some of these things are interesting sometimes in quite unexpected ways. There are many interesting stories about people using these principles. within NLP and also within other disciplines, because principles are principles. If they work in NLP, they work everywhere else too. There was a guy, a philosophy professor, and this was I think back in the 80s, sometimes mid-80s maybe. I think it was New York. He was a philosophy professor, and he said he wanted to go into the schools where the kids were carrying guns and knives, and where they were, really downtown, low life, low level, gangster producing schools. He wanted to go and teach them philosophy. And they all said, people in the education field said, this is just insane, There is no way that kids like that will be interested in philosophy. And by now, you may have guessed where the story is going. They were. These kids who were taking drugs and carrying guns and knives, and at the time wearing those gigantic big baggy trousers, looked like they were made for somebody who, I don't know if you remember this, who was kind of 5 times bigger. That was what they did at the time. He went into these schools and taught these kids about Socrates and Aristotle. And they liked it. And the thing is that the whole level of the school went up because the kids learned how to think. It was that simple. They didn't know how to think. Nobody had ever taught them how to think. We don't teach our children that. And then we complain when they make bad decisions or they have negative emotions. It's quite a good idea. We should do that, in my view, let's do that before we do anything else. Let's teach kids how to evaluate their emotions, and let's teach them how to think with their brains, and then a lot of things will change. And feedback versus failure. This is a key one. You never fail. You never ever fail. And that's not just wishful thinking. That's not just being nice. It's technically true. One of the things we're concerned with in NLP is what is logically, what is technically true, what can be demonstrated as being true. We don't say things just because they sound nice. We say them because we can demonstrate the truth of them. And this is one of them. Because if you've tried to learn Russian 20 times and you still haven't succeeded, well, you haven't failed. You've just got feedback about learning Russian. The feedback might be, it's much harder than you thought it was. Now, the important thing is, and if you've ever, we've all done this, I'm sure, because we've all learned things. You go back to that child, which we all were at some point, that couldn't walk. Did you ever see a child, have you ever seen a child say, I'm giving up, that's it. I have failed to learn to walk. I'm just not going to try anymore. This is unknown. No child has ever done this. They fall over, they walk into things, sometimes they hurt themselves, they do whatever it takes, and they do it again and again. They just simply don't stop. And what happens? They walk. There's also no point with children. Children who aren't in some way disabled or have some other difficulty or issue, obviously. But and even those children often will go beyond those limitations in any case. But you never see a child that says, that's it. Well, they wouldn't be able to say this actually, would they? You never get a child that thinks, that's it, I'm giving up learning to talk. It hasn't worked, I can't talk. You have to imagine they're just thinking this. So the difference about this, it's not just being nice and saying nice things with words, it's the reality is that if you don't have failure in your way of constructing your map, in your way of viewing your experience and deciding on your behaviors, then what you will do is you will examine the feedback that you're getting from the situation. So every time I talk to him or her about that subject, I always have an argument. I have failed to get my point across. Well, the moment you stop failing and start looking at the feedback, you can analyze what's going on. It really is like that. And you can analyze what it is that they do. You can analyze what it is that you do. You can analyze how you might learn something that would change it. I'm currently reading a book called Crucial Conversations, which is absolutely superb. It's not NLP, but it's one of these things that the principles overlap. If you see it around, it's worth having a look if you care about communication. And it talks about how some conversations are just conversations, but sometimes you have a conversation where if you don't get it right, things will change, for a long time in a way that you don't want them to. And this can be, professionally or personally or educationally. And so it's really useful to be able to really, really stand back and look and analyze what's going on, and then you can come into it with a technique and do something with it. And then if that doesn't work or it doesn't get you the results you want, now this is the second line, whether all results and behaviors are achievements, even if you fell off the bike, and you now have cut your hand. It's actually happened to somebody I know just recently. And this was my daughter actually, who's 40, but she fell off the bike and she cut her hand in the process of teaching her 3-year-old daughter to ride a bike. So that wasn't the result she wanted. You know, the result she wanted was her daughter becoming more competent, which her daughter is, step by step. So even if something happens where you get a result you don't want, it's still an achievement because you have learned something from that. But you only learn if you get rid of the concept of failure. It's a terrible word. It should be a swear word. You know, it should be up there with all the really bad swear words. So you can think about how these ways of thinking about things can really change how we go. They're not just words. They totally change the way we behave and relate. Number one, didn't really look at, but I always put this up when we're doing, you know, stuff live, which we always have done until recently. But this sounds kind of clever, but you might be in a position, and this is quite, the example I'm going to give might be quite relevant now, because the example I often give with this one is, suppose you were in prison. Suppose you were locked up and you were in prison. Now, you wouldn't be able to change your reality. You couldn't just say, okay, I've had enough of prison now, you know, maybe you've been locked up for 5 years or something, you know. And this happens to innocent people too, so it happens to the good people too. How you experience being in prison is going to make all the difference. So you can't change the content, but you can change how you experience it. And just a couple of weeks ago for a seminar, I was looking for examples of this, and there are so many people who went in prison because they had supposedly done something criminal and came out a few years later as a lawyer. I mean, there's a whole load of these people. They're in America, they're in Africa, they're everywhere. Because they thought, well, look, I'm in here for 5 years, you know, what am I going to do with 5 years? And so they started studying law. Some of them are wonderful to look at their stories. And here's just a visual illustration of the of my favorite one. There's a map. Okay, so this is a very, you know, literal interpretation. Well, it would be if the animation works. Let's try that again. So what you just saw was a map of a certain area of Nepal where we went trekking a few years ago. And then what you're seeing now is views of the actual territory. And it's worth kind of thinking about this. I like to use this sort of thing as a metaphor. You cannot get the smell or the feel of the air or the taste of anything at all when you're looking at that map. You can't get any sensation from that map. You have to actually get off the map and go into the territory, go into the reality. Okay, so I'm going to leave you there. Layla, are you ready to take over with how the mind works? So we're doing here in this webinar, we're doing exactly what we do, apart from being in the room with you, exactly what we do in the live introductory session. So Layla will take this bit and talk about some ways that the mind works.
Okay. Hi there, everybody. I'm back again. Just want to say a little bit about how the mind works, and Phil's just going to take a quick break and then he'll come back and join you, and hopefully we'll have time to do another practical exercise. I don't want to go into too much theory about this, just a simple overall model about how we can understand how the mind works. Those of you who were right from the beginning will have heard I talked a little bit, mentioned the fact that we have the conscious and the subconscious mind, and most people have heard about that nowadays. They have the general idea. Sort of popular psychology is well known up to an extent. And once upon a time, a few years ago, when we still lived in Bahrain, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to travel around Lagos state. That wasn't necessarily fortunate. It's quite an interesting place, Nigeria, if anyone's been there. What was fortunate was that I was in the company of Dr. Ben Carson, who, before he retired and then went into politics, was one of the most famous neurosurgeons in the world. He's the guy that invented the what they call the partial hemispherectomy. That's where they actually separate, take out a big chunk of your brain, and if they take it out the left side of the brain, the right side, with a, as he called it very modestly, a clever bit of rewiring, will actually regrow itself. He's the guy that developed techniques for separating conjoined twins when their brains or their spines were fused together, you know, Siamese twins. And very, very well-known guy, and trained, I think he was the first doctor who trained in four different branches of medicine. So not only in pediatrics, but also in neurosurgery, in oncology, cancer research, and I'm trying to remember what the other one was. Maybe it was endocrinology. Anyway, because we were driving around a lot, from going from one place to another. We had something called Brain Fair. It was the first time that the World Memory Championships and so on had been going to Africa. And I had the chance to ask him a few questions. And one of the things I said to him is, you know, two things. One, I said, I've been told by Tony Buzan, and he's the guy that invented mind mapping and radiant thinking. Some of you may have heard of him, very expert in the field of memory and how the brain works. And I said, Tony Buzan told me that we have something like, you know, 100 billion or more brain cells, that we've got neurons in our brains. Is that true? Because I can hardly even conceive of that number, maybe even 200 million. He laughed. He said, actually, his research is out of date. Bless you, Karen. He said, his research is out of date if he's telling you that. He said, we're talking trillions now. So if you just let that sink into your mind, because even just billions is more than the number of stars in a galaxy. So he said, in a very kind of laid back American way, I won't try and do his accent, Dr. Benthausen, he said, you've got an awful lot of spare capacity. And I said, this is the other question. I said, you know, psychologists, we often discuss how much of the mind, how much of the brain is conscious, how much is unconscious. What do you think as a neuroscientist, as a neurosurgeon? He said, I think you're lucky if it's more than 95 to 99%. If it's that's about the amount I think is just unconscious, is going unconsciously. You're lucky if you've got 5%. He said, I think it's nearer to 1% for many people. And again, I found that very interesting to think about. Someone who's really an expert in the brain says most of what we're doing with our brains is actually going on without the level of us consciously being aware of it. And we're not just talking about the autonomic nervous system. We're not just talking about you know, our blood pumping around and our cells being replaced and all that physical stuff that our automatic functions do, but also our behaviors, our responses, all the things we've learned, they just run on autopilot most of the time. So if you can kind of keep that in mind when we talk about NLP, that we have a working premises. And the reason I say that is because it's not an absolute belief. NLP is very keen on cultivating opinions and looking at the facts, and not cultivating, as I said, a belief. This is how it is. I believe this. I believe that. It says the less you believe things, the more you're open-minded, the more you can change the way you think about things, the more flexible you can be. So if we think of this as being the premises, is that there are two main levels of consciousness: the waking conscious, which you could call the editor. It sets the policy, it has our values, it has our humanness. It's very important, but it's only a very tiny percentage of what we're actually doing in our brain most of the time. And the subconscious robot. And that's the part of us that likes to say, yes, it does what it's told to do through programming, but that means it has to be repeated and repeated until it kind of gets the idea. And in psychology, we talk about, it takes about 21 repetitions to build a simple habit. Things like walking and talking and stuff like that. I think Phil was talking to you about that a bit earlier. That takes longer. And of course, that happens when we're babies and when we're toddlers, when our learning centers in our brains are switched on and the most receptive. It's not actually very difficult to do just about anything else in life. Once you've learned to do those most difficult things, you do that before the age of 5. You're already walking and you've already got quite a good grasp of talking for most kids by that stage. So you've done the most difficult things. This stuff is easy. So the subconscious runs all that automatic stuff and of course all the physical survival functions. And here's where partly the problem comes in, because that also runs the stress response, the fear, flight, fright, the freezing and then either running away or getting angry. And the problem with that is that most of the time, the response that we have is way, way out of proportion to reality, to what actually is required. And the problem is also, if we don't act on that, if we don't do something physical, that's what it's designed to do, then we tend to get stressed and we get into an anxious state and we're constantly on alert. And this is where, in terms of NLP, both NLP and coaching and therapy take this on board. When someone's in a state of chronic stress, they can't think clearly or creatively. And it's really important that we learn how to switch on the relaxation response. And that's something that's done through the use of hypnotic language, which NLP does, and also therapy does as well, or hypnotherapy and those types of therapies anyway. Another working premise is that the subconscious maintains a record of all experience. So anything that's ever happened to us, anything we've taken in through the sensory data, the information through our visual, auditory, kinesthetic or feeling senses, It's all stored away there. And more we're tending to think, and certainly those of us who work in therapy and use hypnotherapy and the sorts of therapy that open up the memory banks, if you like, actually says we have such a thing as cellular memory. And if you want to have some example of that, think about the fact that you might have a scar from an injury, and one scar will go away and you don't even know you've got it. You don't even know you had that injury sometime later, whereas other scars, sometimes even from childhood, they still repeat themselves and they're still there. So think about this. How could that be true? How could that happen? Because your cells are changed. Your skin changes about every 6 to 8 weeks. You've got a completely new set of skin. So obviously something in us retains a memory of things, especially if they're traumatic or there's something that's unresolved. So this learned behavior of ours becomes subconscious function. You know, first time you go somewhere and you don't know where it is and your sat-nav system's not working very well, you have to stay very alert, right? Very conscious and aware. After a while, once you've know that place, that route very well, you probably find yourself arriving there and you don't even remember how you got there. You were busy thinking about lunch or what's going on, or, you know, or who's coming over to visit. You didn't even realize what was happening on the journey unless something happened that alerted you, like someone suddenly drove across you. They jumped the lights ahead of you. Then you snap back into fully alert consciousness. So a lot of the time we do go around as if we're robots. We're just in another world a lot of the time. Every thought that we have creates a physical reaction in the body. And if we were physically together, and on the NLP face-to-face courses, we do a little bit on this, you will realize that actually just the way that you think, just the way that you feel, just the way that you represent something in your mind to yourself makes a difference to the physiology. And that's because the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. It just gets the data, it gets the information, and then it acts on it. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a moment to admit someone who's waiting to join the meeting. I don't know how she was out, but anyway. So she'll be back in again now, the lady who was just waiting to get in again. Okay, right. So every thought that we have, as I said, creates a physical reaction in the body. And if somebody has a mental condition, a set of emotions, stress, etc., then it will cause a physical change, which is how come, sorry, I'm getting messages flashing up that people are waiting to come in. So I'm just saying admit everybody. Okay. It will cause a physical change. So if you watch someone depressed, if you ever have been depressed or been around someone depressed, you'll know that actually their physical responses, the way that they move, the way that they are, is constantly in this sort of state. Their body language, their head might be down, their shoulders are drooped. If somebody's hyper and they're very anxious and they're constantly looking around and moving around, it gets to be that they can't even sit still for a bit. You know that restless leg syndrome that people get? The legs going and the kind of moving around. So it starts to create physical changes in the body. And of course, eventually, if someone is very unhappy, we have a whole set of stress-related illnesses. And when I say stress-related, when someone says, oh, you mean it's all in your mind is in your body. All your thoughts, your feelings, your nervous system is part of you. So many diseases, cancer, autoimmune diseases, irritable bowel syndrome and digestive problems. There are many, many skin conditions, stress-related alopecia where your hair falls out, eczema, psoriasis. There are so many conditions that are actually the result of stress, unhappiness, and anxiety. So this is why it's really, really valuable to be able to learn how to change your state and create a different state. And the NLP does a lot of that. The other thing is, the way the mind works is we can only really focus on one thought or emotion at a time. I don't mean you can't have bittersweet, or you think of one thing, then you think of another, you go back and forth between the two. But if you're really going to concentrate on something, and that's why, by the way, multitasking is so overrated, because in order to think deeply, in order to think creatively, in order to come up with new ideas, you need to be able to focus and concentrate. So if you're running around spinning the plates and answering the phone and dealing with the kids, or, you know, dealing with this, that, and the other, you don't actually do good creative thinking or come up with solutions or new ideas. You tend to be in the beta state of brainwave activity and stressed. And we all know, probably most of you know, that creativity can only happen when you're in the alpha state or even going down into a really deep theta state of deep relaxation before you fall asleep. So the other thing about how the mind works, imagination, it's powerful and it will tend to override reason. So when you feel emotional, when you feel stressed, when you feel nervous, and you see this now, the situation we're in with the whole COVID thing, is that people have such an imagination, such a powerful imagination about what's going to happen, that they go around in a state of anxiety, and that will override, even if they hear a doctor talking or they watch some program which says, hang on a minute, let's look at both points of view on this. If they have a fear, we're all going to die, something terrible is going to happen, then actually that overrides what we know in terms of reason. And Phil and I have spent quite a lot of time during this lockdown with some of our graduates and students as well, doing some research. And I'm not going to get into that on this seminar. Another time, or if you want to have a chat to us, there's some really interesting things about the facts as opposed to the media representations and the way people getting so uptight. And of course, guess what happens when you're stressed and anxious? Your immune system goes down. You're not able to fight off whatever your bug or condition, whatever virus or bacteria around. If your immune system is knocked out, if your digestive system is not working properly, if all of your survival mechanisms are switched off or bypassed for the need to survive, then that's not good for anybody's health. So NLP, as I mentioned earlier, is very important when it comes to health and well-being. So,
hello, this is Elisa. Can I ask?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I needed to leave 5 minutes ago because I had something going on with my phone, and I always divide my internet connection through my phone to my other phone, so there was some technical stuff going on. Okay, yeah. So anyway, I have been started to analyze this thing that which ones comes first, thought or emotion, and I have come to a conclusion at the moment that there is something coming within. I think it's an impulse from my subconscious. First that, and after that comes my emotion, after that thought, and after that physical reaction. Because, for example,
go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm very emotional person, so I always, and I'm highly sensitive. This sensory, what is that? Sensory hyper person, like my
hypersensitive. Yeah.
Yes, hypersensitive and everything, emotional and all those kind of things. So I feel that my heart is always in tune, sort of, but then I can block with my fears, my feelings, and my needs. Okay, but I feel that first comes some trigger or impulse. After that comes emotion, and after that comes physical reaction.
Well, you're absolutely right, because all the research that we have from neuroscience and from psychology tells us, and there's a whole very popular branch of psychology which we teach and use, is cognitive behavioral therapy. And whether it's in spiritual practice, in CBT, etc., the cycle is that the thought is what actually comes first, but it happens super fast. You know, they say nothing is faster than the speed of light. Actually, the speed of thought is even faster, because you can think of something way beyond what the speed of light even would take years to get to. You can think about it. So the thought comes first, but often you're not aware of it consciously. Remember, I was saying about the unconscious mind, and then that triggers the emotion that goes with it. So again, we do seminars, things where we go into the whole science of emotional intelligence, how that works. But yeah, you get a thought, which means it triggers a response emotionally, and then that triggers a whole series of events in your body. So you're absolutely right, but sorting it out, noticing what the trigger is, noticing what thought comes first, is part of the process of understanding yourself. And in NLP we say the best thing is to actually start reflecting on yourself, but rather than in simply like, say, mindfulness meditation, where you're aware of your thoughts and then your feelings. But in NLP, we actually work actively to change that state so that you recognize what your state is. And by state, we mean the whole thing. How you're visualizing, how you're talking to yourself, what you're saying to yourself, how you're feeling, how you're breathing, all of that. As soon as you're aware of that, you can do something about it to change it. So you remember, I think Phil said earlier in one of the slides, therapy asks why. So therapy is interested in the triggers. Why is it you feel like this? NLP is more concerned with the practical applications. How? How do you upset yourself? How do you depress yourself? How do you raise yourself up into a positive state where you're primed to be happy? So I'm sorry you have to leave us soon. We are going to be running another 2 of the NLP introductory type webinars. So if you can't stay to the end of this one, please join us on another one if you're interested. Or you may be able to get a link to this one. As I was saying earlier, we'll ask if Illuminations can put the link out there to people who missed or had to leave early. So thanks for your contribution there. It was very relevant. Thank you. So if we move on from the basic premises to look at the power of imagination, which was on that slide, you know, basically if you're to weigh up reason and imagination, if there's a conflict, especially in a stress or a survival situation, guess what's going to win? It's going to be imagination every time. So as soon as you think there's a threat, as soon as you think there's something that threatens your survival, again, when I say think, I don't mean sit and reflect on and logically analyze. I mean, if a thought comes, whoa, I'm in danger, you will act on that and you will have a whole imagination about what's going to happen. And the thing about that is very often it's negative because it runs us. In NLP, we're concerned about how can we start to reverse that process so we actually manage, control, or trigger what the imagination does. Having said that, you will never be able to stop your survival response kicking in if there really is a threat to your survival. At that moment, if a car jumps the lights and nearly bashes into you, you do not want to be sitting thinking, what technique shall I use for this, right? You're going to act on your instincts. But NLP will help you to actually start becoming far more aware and alert and sensitive so that perhaps you're more aware at the point that that car starts jumping the light that you can take action on it rather than wait until you find yourself in that big stress situation. So some ways of thinking about things are more powerful than others, and I'll demonstrate that with you in a minute. Those of you who've got a bit of room around you to just do a little exercise with me. The images and the words that we use, to represent things will affect our feelings, both physical and emotional. So again, I'll get you to demonstrate that for yourself. And we can achieve physical change in our bodies in a matter of seconds by simply thinking about things differently. And again, so much research on this now that whatever pictures we make in our minds, however we talk to ourselves, whatever feelings we start focusing on will make a difference instantly, which is why all the nonsense about giving people drugs for depression, stuff about brain chemistry, it's absolute nonsense. It's not scientifically validated at all. Again, I can talk about that another time if people are interested and give you references. We can change our brain chemistry in a matter of moments by whatever it is that we think about. The problem is we get in habits of thinking about things in certain ways that then induce certain sorts of brain chemical reactions and body reactions and all of that. So if we think about things differently, we can get a different physical result. And of course, mental focus produces a physical sensation of energy in our body. So I'd like to just take you through a little exercise on this in a moment. So just to remind you, Phil will have mentioned to you that NLP is all about how we represent things to ourselves. So just as we've got eyes that look outside, ears that hear sounds outside, senses, you know, tactile, we feel heat, cold, and also even in our bodies we feel emotions, which are basically senses in our body, churning around in our stomach, in our heart, and so on. If anyone says, oh, I really love you, I can just feel this love, you think, what are you talking about? If they point to their head, because we don't feel love in our head, right? We feel love in our heart. If you're upset and worried and nervous, you'll feel it in your stomach, or maybe around between your heart and your gut. If you feel physically aroused, if you feel sexually aroused, I don't think you're going to have a very good time if it's all just in your head. So it's important that we understand that the mind and the body work together as a team on this. So we have the senses, the subconscious and right brain process particularly well imagination, symbols, metaphors, and stories. And remember I said the subconscious accounts for a huge amount of our mental activity. So if something is only appealing to the left brain, if it's just A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't appeal to the imagination, which likes pictures and stories. You know, for example, if I was going to say to you, now, once upon a time, something really interesting happened, you're immediately going to listen to me because you know that once upon a time is the beginning of a story. And those of you who've got kids know exactly how that works. You know, they'll be all over the place. And then you say, do you want to know the story about what happened once upon a time? And there they are. They're really eager to hear about it. And the more colorful and interesting the story is, the more they'll engage with it. So that's what the subconscious likes, and that's why we use that kind of language. We all process the information, as Phil was talking to you about, with your internal senses. So just as we, as I said, have those senses outside, and we also, of course, have the smell and the taste, but for the purposes of NLP, the main emphasis is on the visual, auditory and kinesthetic, because it seems that from olfactory and gustatory functions tend to happen automatically. They don't really get processed much at a conscious level, whereas visually, sound-wise, auditorily and tactile, sense kinesthetically, we do tend to be more aware of that consciously. People tend to have more dominant styles of processing information. Now, you never go around saying, oh, I'm a visual person or I'm an auditory person, because we're all a bit of all of them. But some people definitely have more of a preference. Artists tend to be able to visualize things. They can describe what they can see in their mind's eye. People who are really into music, for example, might well be able to imagine music really vividly in their mind, and they tend to think about things in terms of sound. Or people who like to replay conversations in their mind. Some people really like maybe different in different spheres. For example, I'm quite visual in certain ways, but if you want me to use a computer or understand how to use a new system, I need to physically get my hands on it. I need to hold the mouse, I need to be on the keyboard, or I don't tend to retain that information. So we all use our senses in different ways. And of course, when you're using language, if you're using hypnotic and NLP, what we call multi-model language patterns, then that language is far more useful, far more likely to influence other people when we bring in the sorts of thoughts, feelings, metaphors, stories, images and symbols that relate to their interests. So if they're keen on I don't know, high-speed cars and bikes, if you talk about lakes and tranquil streams and being in the countryside, they're probably going to not be interested. But if you talk about whizzing along really fast with your wind in your hair, they're going to be going along with that. So NLP is about how can I use language if you're going to influence other people in ways that will be of interest to them. So let's do a little exercise for you to prove to yourself about how the subconscious can't tell the difference between what's real and imagined, and that makes a big difference. So if you've got a bit of space around you, I'll demonstrate the best I can, but you can do this yourself. I'd like you to just reach out and put your arms out so they're straight in front of you, just straight in front of you, and make sure you've got a bit of space on either side of you so you're not going to bash into anything. So you can see my arms are out straight, parallel, just as if they're, parallel with the floor. So join with me in this, you'll get more from it. Okay, so reach your arms out. I can't see how many people are doing it. Now, what I want you to do is to just twist around in your chair, whatever you're on. So I said, make out, if you need to stand up, if you haven't got room, you can do that. And just twist around to the point where your hands are pointing at some part and you feel like, yeah, that's as far, I'll stand up so you can see what I mean. I'm just going around about as far as I can go now, and then my back just starts to go, oops, no, that's it now, that's the limit. Okay, so your arms are straight. You can see my arms are straight while I'm doing this. Okay, stretch around. Make a note of wherever you got up to. And now, what I'd like you to do, excuse me, it's got a hair. Otherwise, I won't be able to speak to you clearly. Okay, so you've done that, right? You've moved your arms around, you've swiveled them around, and now I want you to close your eyes down after you've done that. You notice where you've got to. Close your eyes just for a moment. And whilst you've got your eyes closed, just imagine that you're doing that exercise again. But now just imagine as if your spine is extremely flexible, as if it's made of some kind of rubber. It's very strong and thick, so it supports you, but it's bendy. So it's flexible and bendy. And imagine now, just see at your mind's eye that you're twisting around, all the way around, so that your spine goes way, way further than it was able to before. I don't want you to tie yourself up in knots or anything, but just go right the way around in your mind's eye, seeing yourself stretching, really a long way around, way, way further than you went before, even if not completely 360 degrees. And just see how interesting that is, to see your arms just going all the way around, and your back and your spine being really, really flexible. Okay, and now just open your eyes again, put your arms out just as they were before, and do exactly the same thing. Just twist around and just see where your arms go to now. and notice the difference. And you can just show to me or see for yourself, just notice how much difference there was between whether there was a little bit like that or really a lot, between how far your arms went around. Did all of you get that? There was some kind of a difference there. Now, am I a witch or a magician? Did you just suddenly take some special pill and it made something weird happen to your spine? Okay. Now, I'm not saying now you should go and jump off a building, especially not in Dubai, where we have very high buildings, and say, oh, I can grow wings. No, obviously this is going to work within what the human body is capable of, but the human body is capable of way more than we imagine. And that's why a lot of the stuff I'm telling you now, and that Phil's been sharing and that we share on the NLP courses, we have special sports coaches, we have people working with the elite athletes. Some of our graduates work with elite athletes here in the Middle East. You can do a huge amount more with your body, with your flexibility, with your ability to slow time down and speed it up to be able to respond much more quickly by actually tuning your body-mind connection and those senses. So what I've just demonstrated to you is what we might call mind over matter. Okay, so I don't know what's there. Okay, so that kind of flexibility demonstrates that some ways of thinking about things are more powerful than other ways. So now take the reverse of that. I'm not going to get you to do that as an exercise. Imagine I got you and you closed your eyes to imagine that something had happened to rigidly lock your spine into place so it couldn't twist at all. You had no stretch in your spine and you just couldn't move your arms hardly at all and then do them. And guess what would happen? And it does, is that you then start to freeze up, you seize up. This is why people can't take a step when they suddenly feel terrified. You could put a plank, a plank of wood that's plenty broad enough to walk on, and you could put it between two bricks on the floor, and most people would be able to walk along it, no issues. Put that same plank on high structure, just the same distance from each other, same plank. Most people, unless they're really good with heights and do high wire and all that, would be absolutely terrified and would freeze up and couldn't move. So NLP is about helping you to actually find out what those triggers are for you, how you talk yourself into unresourceful states of fear or anxiety or stress, and how to actually use your mind in different ways to actually be able to have much better control over your reactions, your responses, your state, and of course being able to influence other people. So this is what we call representational systems, and Phil is going to, we probably don't have time to do a breakout exercise because of the delays we had at the beginning, but Phil's going to just talk you through how we can have a takeaway from this about starting to watch how people's eyes move. We're just about out of time, so if we can just, we won't do breakout rooms. So you want to take over? Okay, I'll come back at the end just to say bye. So you
so we can't, what we're going to do next, we can't really do it as a proper exercise without being in the same physical space together. But what we can do is we can explain it to you, and then you can start to check it out. You can do this as an exercise for yourself. What we normally do when we're doing this live is we give people little cards. God, there we are. We give people little cards that they can just carry around, and you can easily make these cards yourself. And it's a really good idea to get to grips with this, because you will find it really useful. You might even find it more useful at the time, at the moment, with everybody wearing masks, because as you can't see half their face, you can still learn a lot from what their eyes are doing. It will still be useful once the masks come off. Now, you may have come across this before, I don't know. There's a lot of rubbish talked about this, and we've seen all sorts of things and heard all sorts of things from people. Many people teach this in NLP, and some people teach only this and say it's NLP. This is one aspect of NLP. It's a very important, very useful aspect, and it's probably one of the simplest parts of it. It's one of the simplest aspects to learn and to practice, and of course to teach, which is, I think, is much easier to teach this than it is the language patterns, which I think is why so many people do it. And I also know some people have taken one of these aspects and turned that, like I was saying earlier, turned that into a whole system. There was a guy I met some years ago at some conference who took this one, the auditory digital. Auditory digital just means talking to yourself. he took that one thing and he wrote a book about it, and he sort of created a system around it. And he said that this was, you know, this was the one thing that underlay everybody's problems. And if only we could get to grips with talking to ourselves, you know, everything would be solved. Well, I mean, it's certainly a good idea, but there is more to it. So here's the eye accessing. So if you've come across this before, just put that aside for the moment and just take this as fresh. Some fresh learning here. Just going to move this thing out of the way for myself. Okay, now this is what we say in NLP. And Layla, I believe, has just been talking to you about the representational systems. So we talked about, you know, pictures in your mind, videos in mind. Yes, we all know we do that. NLP gets technical about it. That's you know, that's the difference that makes the difference. It gets technical. Exactly how do we do it? And it has so many different ways of working with this stuff. So this is really like opening a door. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Doctor Who, but in Doctor Who is a time traveler, time and space traveler, and Doctor Who has a vehicle which he travels through time and space, and it's just a small thing. It's an old-fashioned British police phone box, because police used to have their own phone boxes once upon a time, but it's just this little box, and you open the door to this little box, and when you go in, there's a vast space inside. So NLP is a bit like that. And this is one of the small doors you can go through to discover all the other things that are there. And as with everything, practice makes perfect. So here's what we say in NLP. We say that you can tell what's going on in somebody's mind by the way their eyes move. Now, some people have got very simplistic and even stupid about this. And I've heard people say, oh yeah, when you look up to the right, that would be that one, that means you're lying. That is a total misunderstanding and misapplication of the concepts of NLP. That's not what we ever said. It's not what Bandler said. It's not what we teach. But what we do say is this. I'm going to put up some bigger writing now for you, because this is straight out of the manual that we use. What we say is this. When you see somebody looking up and to the right, that's what we call visual constructed. That means they're imagining something. They're making a picture. Okay? Now, when they look up and to the left, they're remembering something. They're remembering a picture. When their eyes go across horizontally to the right, then they are constructing a sound. So, you know, it's not actually something that they have heard. It's something that they're making up. And we have, normally when we do this, again, we do this live, we have exercises that we do. We get everybody together and we do exercises and we watch each other's eyes, give each other feedback, and we learn the practicality of this. Over here is what we call auditory remembered. Auditory, of course, is a long word for hearing, for ears, in the same way that visual is a long word for seeing. So auditory remembered. So over here is where sounds that we have experienced and we remember them. Down here, when your eyes go down here, it means you're having an emotion or a physical sensation or both, because, you know, emotions and physical sensations are really linked in like this. They're not separate things, they're really meshed. So we call that kinesthetic. And then down here is so-called auditory digital, which is just a clever way of saying talking to yourself. So here's what we say in NLP, that if you watch somebody's eye movements, and I'm going to invite you to do this after. It's like I say, we can't really do this as an exercise in this way, in this situation, especially with people who don't want to actually come on screen and have video on. So that, you know, makes it very limited what we can do. But get the idea, and then go off and do this. And you'll learn a lot, and you'll find out how to not get into arguments that you used to get into so much, and you'll find out how to understand people better, how to get people to be a bit more cooperative, simply by doing this. So this is what tends to happen, is in order, now we talked about the how of an experience, if you remember earlier on, and so when people, you know, somebody says I'm depressed, in NLP we don't say why, we say how do you depress yourself? And what we mean, and they'll say, what the hell do you mean? I don't depress myself, it happens to me. Well, it happens, sort of happens to you, but actually something goes on inside you in order for you to generate that feeling, that state that you call depression, and that's something that you can take control of and change. Because in order to get, remember we talked about states right in the beginning, in order to get any state to take place in you, positive ones as well as negative ones, this is what has to happen. And this is true for absolutely all human beings, no exceptions. We all have brains and nervous systems and bodies, and they all work in the same way. This is what has to happen. You have to put together 2 or more often 3 of these things in a certain sequence in order to generate a state. So let's say you want to be depressed. So now a good way to do that would be, just so you know, in case you're feeling too good, good way to do that would be to get an image from the past of something bad happening. Now, of course, if you've been depressed in the past, then you've got plenty of pictures of that. You might also have plenty of other pictures of things going wrong, of you failing, of people being nasty to you, of all sorts of stuff. So you can get that picture. Now, you've got the picture, so that's in your frontal lobes here, and it's transmitting information to the rest of your brain. And then what you can do is you can go down here and talk to yourself about it. So now you can actually have this inside conversation. You can tell yourself how bad it was, how it's probably going to happen again, and how you don't know how to get out of it, and that's what always happens, and whatever whatever you want to get into. So you can have your picture, you can talk to yourself, and then you can generate an emotion. Of course, if you want to make it really bad, you can get this, and then you can get this, and then you can go over here, and you can make a picture of it happening tomorrow, and another one of the day after, and another one of the month, and another one for every day of your life, if you like. And that will definitely generate this emotion. So that's now, this is to get the idea of what happens inside people. So when somebody, if you want people to start to help people out, what in this way to get free of their negative emotions and to generate more positive emotions, a good simple thing to do is to notice. If somebody's telling you, if you're the sort of person that people tell their troubles, if somebody's telling you, you know, how bad they're feeling or about the problem they're having, some struggle they're having, watch their eye movements. Now, this obviously does take a bit of practice. You have to learn it. Normally, we give you cards, but I'll tell you about how you can get those in a minute. Watch their eye movements, because if you find that every time they say this thing, and this is what will happen, if every time they tell you this thing and they talk about this thing, they have a pattern. We call these eye patterns. If they do that, if you break the pattern and send them somewhere else, then you can break their state and you can start to help them to generate something new. So the first thing is to do is to actually learn them. So what I recommend you do after we've had this session, I mean, we're going to, you know, there's a live workshop that you can attend, and we will give you cards in those workshops, and we will tell you and teach you how to do this stuff well, because there's doing things and then there's doing them well, isn't there? But in the meantime, just go online and Google eye accessing cues NLP. Get a picture that looks like this or looks as close to this as possible. If it's different from this, ignore it. It's somebody who's messed it up. This is the original you're looking at here. This is Richard Bandler's observation. Get this and then just print it off. And then if you can, get it laminated. Now carry it around with you and just start looking at it. So you can do this with family, friends, colleagues, you know, wherever, strangers, if you're in the mall. Mal's just opening up again now. Cafes and restaurants are opening up. So wherever you go, you can start to study people's eye accessing cues, and then you can start to learn how to use them. So I think that's probably, like I say, we can't do the actual demonstration. What we normally do is we'll have people divide up into threes, and we'll give you each a sheet that has a series of questions that are specially constructed to make people do certain eye accessing patterns. And then you can watch and you can see the reality of this, how it works, how people will construct certain things in certain ways. And that's what these little constructions are called strategies. And once you understand how a strategy works, how somebody puts together an internal representation in order to get into a state which is either positive or negative, then there's all kinds of things you can do with that. Again, great in many fields. If you're a teacher, a parent, a therapist, a manager, counsellor, so many coach, salesperson, so many different situations in which you can use this, because everybody has eyes and everybody goes through these processes in their mind. So do that with, I really recommend you do that with the cards. That is the best we can do for you for now, to start to get to grips with it. But I really recommend you do it. It's a really good, easy way in. Yeah, so yeah, you do that. So Layla's going to come and wrap up and say goodbye to everything. Thanks very much for your attention. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Okay, I realised that because we started late, as you'll know, those of you from the beginning, there were some technical problems we heard after we'd started from Illuminations. They had some technical issues with connection. So sorry about that. So we've overrun a bit, which we're usually pretty prompt. So those of you who need to leave now because we've overrun a bit, then we totally understand. I have already sent a message. I was doing that just now while Phil was talking to you. Sent it to the Abu Dhabi office of Illuminations, asking them to get in touch with you to please, I've asked them to please make the live session available so that you can watch it again if you missed any, or if you just like to watch it again and take it all in. If you want to join us, if you're one of those who are sitting in the waiting room, and I've never dealt with the waiting room before, it's always been done with by somebody else, but today, if you were in the waiting room and you missed some, then I've asked them to get in touch with you and tell you what the other 2 dates are that we're doing introductory workshops, which will be pretty much the same material we covered this evening, so that you can join us again, go through the whole thing, not miss any. And of course, I'll move on to the last slide here. You can see the next course, the actual 7-day intensive live course where we'll teach you all this stuff. We'll go into detail. You'll learn about the both the meta model, analyzing language, and the Milton model, how to use hypnotic, or what we call Ericksonian or Milton model language to influence people, to put them into a different emotional state. Understanding not only the main modalities I've talked about, but what we call the sub-modalities, timeline exercises. As you can see, all those things, all that stuff we cover in that 7 days, so that you go out with a whole bunch of skills and tools that you can go and immediately put into practice, which is why it's called an NLP practitioner. The course runs for a week, as I mentioned. It's from 21st to 27th. It will be in Abu Dhabi. There are only a small number of places because of the legal restrictions in place at the moment. So if you want to join, I would recommend doing it earlier rather than later, because they're also doing a special early bird discount for this course. And the price that you pay, by the way, whether it's the full or the early bird rate, includes not only the course materials and manual, but also the Society of NLP certificate and license, which normally costs the equivalent of around 750 dirhams. So that's all inclusive, everything's included. I think you just need to bring a packed lunch or whatever, but we have breaks and snacks at breaks. So that course will be held, oh, hang on, Phil's put the wrong one on there. It says October. It's actually June. So sorry about that. Or maybe it was my fault. I don't know. But anyway, ignore the October. We'll change that next time. It's not October. It's June. So we'll be in June in Abu Dhabi. Phil and I are then planning to leave. We'll be away for a few months because we've been here for longer than originally intended. So I'm not sure when the next one will be, but I'm sure that Illuminations will be in touch with you as soon as we fixed up dates. For those who want to go on and do the practitioner at a later stage, or to do the master practitioner because they want to go the whole way. So if any of you don't need to rush off now, we can give it another, say, up to 15 minutes for any questions and answers. If there's no questions and answers, then that's fine. We take no offense at all, but as I said, we're aware that we started a bit late, and we like to give you time if you've got any questions. And we had some useful contributions from people, but someone had to leave. So as I said, if you need to go now, that's fine. Thank you for joining us, and great to work with you today. And as I said, a couple of other freebies, webinars coming up, and then the actual course at the end of June. So those who are staying for a bit longer, anyone who's got any questions or wants to make any comments or observations, please go ahead. And I'm here, and Phil's just around the corner, so he can come and talk to you if you have any questions about what he said to you. So over to you. So some of you are still there, but not saying anything.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just said that I'm still here because you asked that, are we still here, anyone?
All right, you're still there, but you don't have to be. Well, that's fine. You can sit and look at my lovely face for a while if you want to. That won't be here that much longer. I can't.
But actually, I do have a question about that. It came back to me, this question of which comes first, thoughts or emotion, and how the situation goes. I meant that even before a thought, for me, according to my experience, what I have noticed by me, because now I'm using myself now as an experimental vehicle to say, because I'm learning to know more myself in any way I can. So I'm exploring my mind and my everything, which is very good for me, because it's very good. The more we know ourselves, the better it is, like you said. So I have noticed when it comes to me that there is first some trigger or impulse, and then this is first, and it's not even thought. it's something which comes from my subconscious, I think, or from
Well,
the energy.
If I could just stop you there
my
and
energy.
say, the thing is, as soon as you take in any kind of trigger, as you refer to it, that means that your senses, whether that's your very sensitive sense, for example, when I say kinesthetic, I don't just mean physically, you know, I'm now touching the desk that this laptop sitting on, but also we have electromagnetic body, we're running on electricity, on electromagnetic energy and water and so on. So when someone is near you, you do actually feel, it's at a very subtle level, you feel that. So our senses is how we take information in. As soon as we have that sense, as soon as the sense brings in the information, then when I say thought, the thought is whatever it is that your mind-body system does to actually make sense of that, right? In NLP, we refer to that as a transderivational search, which is a very complicated jargon term, and there's a fair bit of that because there's linguistics in it. And our job, and Phil is very good at this, is to really simplify these complicated sounding linguistic terms. A transderivational search simply means that your whole mind-body system, the you that you're referring to, immediately tries to make sense of any data, anything at all that goes in through your senses. And as I said, that includes your subtle sensing. As soon as you've got that information, and it is processed, remember, at the fraction of a second, possibly faster than the speed of light, it will go to wherever it is that your mind-body system thinks it goes, thinks it belongs. We have a bank of memories, of experiences and so on stored in us, and it will go to wherever it feels is associated. And remember, your subconscious mind, as you refer to it, doesn't run on logic. It doesn't run on A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 1 is 2. It runs on sensory information. So a bit like a filing system. You know, imagine you have a filing system and it might be filed alphabetically or by topic, but the subconscious mind processes and stores information by sensory experience. So it'll be by color or by sound or by emotion. So for example, I like to give this example in relation to emotion. Suppose you walk into a room and just out of the corner of your eye, your peripheral vision, you're not consciously aware of it. As you say, it's subconscious. It's your sensing system that's below the level of your conscious rational awareness. Just out of the corner of your eye, there's something you can just see coiled in the corner of your eye. And in that fraction of a second, immediately, your body-mind system quickly looks for something that it can relate to. And in this case, it comes up with snake. There's an image and a picture and a feeling of a snake because there's something coiled that's just triggered off that snake. So immediately your whole mind-body system will go into an alert. It will probably go into the stress response of either fear to run away because we think of snakes as dangerous, or maybe you've been raised in a situation where you know how to handle a snake, you know how to get a stick and whack it or shoo it away. So however your conditioning is, whatever your subconscious conditioning is, you'll respond. Then all that's happened right in a fraction of a second, and then you just look, and a moment later you realize consciously, you see, oh, there's no snake there. It's actually a rope. Someone had coiled a rope and put it in the corner. As soon as that happens, your left brain gets involved, right? Your reflective conscious mind goes, oh, it's just a rope, not a snake. But here's the thing, very often what happens is then we've already been triggered. So then although we know consciously it's not a snake, it's just a rope, we've already got now all the emotions, all the hormones have been triggered, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the noradrenaline, all the stress chemicals have been triggered because we thought there was something scary and we had to run away. And this again is that the more you're aware of that, and with NLP there's a lot of emphasis on becoming sensorily aware of what's happening in your mind-body system, then you can do something, make an intervention, for example, where you actually become aware of where all those emotions are churning around, and you can then deliberately do a particular intervention, a particular NLP technique, and there are many, to actually calm it down, change it around so that now you're feeling okay, you're feeling confident, it's not a big deal. And that's how NLP can be used to do things like what we call the fast phobia fix and all sorts of anxieties. We've had people go home from courses who've only been maybe on the course 2-3 days, and then they've learned one of these techniques. I'm just thinking of one guy in particular who went home and immediately got rid of his sister-in-law had a phobia. just gone just like that. Not an expert, not spent years training as a therapist, just using a particular NLP technique so that she could then actually make a different image, a different picture, think of it differently, and then suddenly she wasn't afraid. And I don't think there's a single NLP course goes by where we don't have at least one or two, and sometimes several people on the course will say, oh, I have a phobia of cockroaches, or I'm really scared of cats, or whatever it is. By the time they go out of the course at the end of the 7 days, they have absolutely no issues. And sometimes, and this is very funny when this happens, they don't even remember that they have that fear in the first place. And they say, really? No, I don't think that's the case. They can't even remember that they have that problem in the first place. So it's about actually, as you said, getting to know yourself, learning your responses, and starting to take action to do something about the ones that you don't like. The ones you like and the ones that work for you, fine, you can leave those in place. In fact, you can even enhance them more. But most people come wanting to be able to change things that they would like to change for the better, like to be able to relate to people, you know, more productively, get over that issue they have with someone that they argue with a lot, or whatever it might be. So it's practical in that way. So I hope that addresses what you've raised, because what you're saying is absolutely right. So many of our responses are automatic, they're subconsciously triggered, but there is a thought, you just won't necessarily be aware of it because it's so rapid. As I said, it just goes like an impulse. Think of it going down that, the neural net, just going zip, straight to the place where something related to that, something can relate to that, and then it produces an image, a feeling, a whole set of responses. And that, by the way, is sometimes why we feel annoyed with people. We don't like certain people we meet. And then when you actually go digging, it turns out because something about that person reminds you of your teacher at school who humiliated you in front of the class. Now, the therapy route is to go and sort that out, find out what happened, help to release the trauma, and that can be very useful. The NLP route is, it doesn't need to go back there. It just fixes the issue right here and now, and then makes what we call a timeline to the future, what we call future pacing or forward pacing, to actually rehearse being in situations where something like that might happen, but now you've changed your responses. It just doesn't bother you. You've, if you like, you've desensitized yourself to things that used to trigger you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and this is exactly what I mean. I meant exactly this impulse, which is very sudden, very, very subtle, and comes just like a speed of something out of this world. Yeah. I cannot even describe it, but I just know that it's like ping.
Yeah. And when you know you can put yourself into a state where it's like you can slow time down. It's why, by the way, in sporting, you know, tennis players or boxers in boxing matches, they learn to actually put themselves into a state where they can kind of just disassociate from their usual state. Means they can start to slow time down in their mind, and then they can see that punch coming or see that ball coming. It's why you see that, as I said, top sports people usually have people, the sports psychologists use NLP and hypnosis techniques all the time with them. There was I don't know if you ever read about, but in the Australian Olympics many years ago, they had a team of, I think it was almost 20 people who did NLP and hypnotherapy, went along with the team, and they won all the medals in just about all. I think there was only other one nationality won one medal apart from the Russians, because they had people working with them on increasing their sensory, their sensory acuity, we call it in NLP, their calibration skills, their ability to imagine as if their fingers were longer so they could swim faster. And I used to be, many years ago, I used to be a dean at the University of Bath. And Bath was a university, well, still is known in the UK for, it's a research university, but they have a very big sports department, and it's actually the centre for what we call Sports England for the southwest area. And we had the Olympic swimming team. Several of them were students at the university and were also in the Olympic team. And I'd learned years before, you know, in psychology and working with people and working with the mind, this idea that if you imagine that your fingers are longer, that you actually swim faster. And I talked to some of the sports psychologists who were coaches working with the team, and I said, you know, I learned about this many years ago. And they said, that's exactly what we do. What you're describing, exactly what we do. And if we make them imagine their fingers are too long, it doesn't work. And if they don't imagine them as long enough, it doesn't work. But if it's just about the right length. And I said, so how long is that? And they said, about double the length of your fingers, about inches. That would be like about, I guess, 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches longer. When they imagine that, when they visualize that, their hands respond accordingly and they swim faster. So it's interesting how we can, as you said, you can start to learn and observe and learn about yourself as a person. But the other thing is in NLP, as I said, is looking at how other people tick and how can I work with others to influence them. And of course, because we're ethical, because we're client-centered, we encourage people to do that for positive reasons. Of course, there are people who use it to sell you things. There are people who use it to control your mind, to do the mind control stuff. And we say better to know that, because forewarned is forearmed. You heard that saying? If you know what people are trying to do with you, they're trying to sell you stuff or they're trying to manipulate you, then you actually can deal with that more easily than if you are not aware of it and you just innocently let them manipulate you. So, and I'm not saying they're all consciously doing NLP. Some of them are just naturally manipulative people, but some people do. And we meet some of them. As I said, they go on courses specially. There's a guy who specializes in the States in, what does he call it? Using hypnosis and NLP and seduction. So he teaches guys to go out and seduce women on the street. So they'll have a whole series of things they'll do. So the woman will suddenly find herself saying yes to going out on a date with them. So people use, to us, it's like technology. You can use electricity to electrocute yourself, or you can use it to power a lamp or run your appliances with. So think of this as technologies for the mind. And then what are you going to do with the technology? And we encourage people to use it ethically. But I just mentioned that because some people say, oh, isn't that manipulative? You know, we manipulate people all the time. Whenever you say to someone, hello, how are you? And you smile at them, you're manipulating them. You're not doing it on purpose consciously, but you're doing it so that you can appear friendly, so that they'll like you. You know, if your boss says to you at work, how are you? Are you okay today? You just say, yes, I'm fine, which is often a big lie, isn't it? You know, maybe your husband's just walked out on you, or the kids have been up all night being sick. And you feel very far from fine, but you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to bring all your personal life into it. You say, yes, I'm fine. So, you know, we manipulate other people. The question is, do we do it in an effective way that makes everyone feel good? Or do we do it in a way that actually makes them feel bad and they don't want to be around us or we around them? So NLP is great for influencing other people in a positive way. And we encourage people to do that. As I said, we like win-win solutions. That's what we're about. Thank you for your contribution. Very interesting one. Anyone else got any questions or anything that they'd like to share? Okay, so I'm not hearing anything. So I'm assuming you're all either have fallen asleep or you're just really enjoying sitting relaxing in your chair while someone else does all the talking.
I think it was a lot of information to take on.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Well, as I said, if you want to come and do it in bite-sized chunks and, you know, would like to rethink it, either have a look once Illuminations let you know that it's available to you, or come on one of our other freebies or the actual course. And if you've got questions from, say, an earlier one, then write them down and then you can ask them as we go through, because the content will be pretty much the same. We're giving an overview, that's all. The actual courses, we have a curriculum to follow, but I have to say every course is different because it will reflect the people in the course, how we put it into practice, what things we work on specifically. Each course works with the individuals that are in that course, but they all cover the curriculum, which you can see is on the slide screen right now, but probably some of that will look like complete gobbledygook to you because, as I said, there's a fair bit of jargon, but we'll help you to understand what that jargon means and make it work for you.
I want to ask, are you physically in Abu Dhabi or UK, or where are you now?
Well, physically right now, I'm sitting in Dubai. As of I think it's the 18th, we'll be over in Abu Dhabi because we have one course we're teaching in Abu Dhabi on the weekend of the 19th and 20th. That Phil's running, and then we'll be there for the 7-day course because Phil will lead that and I will come in and do 1 or 2 bits on it myself. So we'll be physically in Abu Dhabi for the last couple of weeks of June, and then we're heading off, hopefully, she says, fingers crossed, if the flights aren't cancelled again, we'll be flying back to our centre in Morocco in early July. And then we haven't yet set a schedule because, as you can imagine, everybody's a bit uncertain at the moment about the situation with borders. I mean, we were supposed to be back in Morocco in March and here we still are. So yeah, the plan is that if things if things work out well and we're able to come and go more easily and so on, then we will come and do work in Abu Dhabi at the new center that they're running there. Because the Dubai center is well established and we've been working in Dubai for many years, but as I said, the last nearly 3 years, we've been coming and going. So we still have the business here, but we're physically located in Morocco and also in the UK. So is that sufficient answer for your question?
Hey, do you like Morocco?
Yeah, we especially like some parts of Morocco, as you would imagine. Do you know Morocco? Are you Moroccan?
No, I know because I have Moroccan friends and I will go there.
Okay.
I hope I can go there this year.
Essaouira? You know Essaouira?
No, I don't know.
Okay, Essaouira is about halfway down on the Atlantic coast. So if you go to Marrakesh in the middle there and you draw a line straight west to the coast, Essaouira is right on the coast there. Very iconic place. It's been around for thousands of years. The Romans and the Phoenicians were there, and then the Portuguese built a big fort there. And it's a very popular tourist place with the Medina and so on. And we have a place that we built a center there that's just outside Essaouira, looking out over the Atlantic there. So obviously we love that part of it very well.
Sounds lovely.
It is, yeah. Very mild weather. Doesn't get really hot like it does in Marrakesh in the summers, because we always have the Atlantic winds coming in. Very popular with windsurfers and surfers and people who do kite surfing, all this kind of thing. They love it there because you get wind coming in off the Atlantic. So it doesn't get really, really hot like the desert. You know, when you've lived in the Middle East, Morocco is actually quite mild. Not like the UK, of course. But yeah, so yes, we have a very nice center there. And it's a nice location. The only problem is that to fly direct from the UAE, you have to go from Dubai to Casablanca, and then you have quite a long drive down to Essaouira or to Marrakesh. But there's only direct flights to Casa from Dubai. I'm not sure about what's the other one? The other airline, the one that goes from Abu Dhabi.
Etihad.
Yeah, Etihad. I'm not sure where Etihad flies to. I haven't been on Etihad, but we do fly from Dubai to Casa quite regularly, quite frequently. But at the moment, as I said, we're waiting to hear. We have a ticket booked for July, but they cancelled it from March, so we have to, fingers crossed, that we can fly back in July. Yeah, we know Dubai very well. We have many good friends here, but at the moment, because we're just in the service department, it's not the most fun place to be. We're used to having sea views in Morocco with lovely, quiet, peaceful. We have 3 acres with gardens and growing organic vegetables and everything. So being in Dubai, looking out over a building behind us, no sea views or anything. I'm looking forward to being in Abu Dhabi for a change. Actually, it'll be some variety for us. It's near. Do you know where the Illuminations place is in Abu Dhabi? It's actually on Reem Island, which I believe is called Island of Light. So it's.
No, I have never been there myself. I have been only in Dubai Illumination Center, but Abu Dhabi is a new one for me.
Yeah, that's right. They've just opened it. It was supposed to open early this year, but again, with all the problems, it's been delayed, but they now are open and they're allowed to take clients, but as I said, only small groups of meetings for the time being. But it means we can do the NLP and the energy psychology is a 2-day weekend course that Phil's running there. So we're doing those in person, but with no more than 7 people in each group. Okay, so any other questions, or is that it now? Okay.
I'm good for now. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you all for paying great attention and for putting up with information overload. Just take some deep breaths after the session is over, so you can just relax and let it all sink in. And hope to see you again sometime soon. And take care till then. Stay well and be very happy. Bye for now.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye bye.